We are live. Okay. Hey, everybody. Steve Burns here. Digital Creativity with Stephen Burns, aka Chromalusion. Hey, Diana Vision 2. Hey, welcome to the Photoshop Users Group presentation. And let's see. Good. This screen's being shared. And let's see who else is here. Diana Vision says to you, yep, thank you. We got a lot of people here now. They're all starting to come in. Bilickers or Bilickers, Billikers, I think is how it's pronounced. Welcome, Buster66. Hey, welcome. Diana Vision's here. Eclipse, Eclipse Pee-wee something. Welcome. Gretchen Gainsworth. Oh my gosh, it's the wonderful, beautiful Gretchen. Hello, Gretchen. Welcome. It's good to see you. We got to chat soon. I'll give you a call. Okay. IB Wizard's here. IB Wizard is David Good, who's my co-manager for the Photoshop users group on Facebook. So his avatar is IB Wizard. Jay Pryor, San Diego. Hey, John, how you doing? Welcome. Let's see. We got Michelita, I think is how it's pronounced. Welcome. Sunflower 308, welcome. Let's see who else is here. We have more coming up. They'll be coming in here. And Willie Sakai is here. Welcome, Willie. Hey. All right. So, well, there's a lot more. It's not showing me everything. So everybody kind of, type in the chat box and share with us where you're from, where you're actually dialing in from. I'd like to find out. We have a fantastic presenter today, and I think Willie would definitely appreciate this presenter. I think you all will, but Willie's doing something along the lines of this particular artist. All right, we're gonna get started here in about another minute or so. So, LA, IB Wizard says Mars, Bluebeard62, welcome. From the UK. All right. We usually get a huge international audience on these streams from everywhere. So definitely jump in and share where you're from. We're going to get started here about just another 2 minutes here. I want to just check some things out. And then I also want to start recording the stream. All right, so I'm going to start recording now. Okay, everybody, we are live. We are recording. Type in the chat box and tell me where you're from. For anybody who's still jumping in here new, we have, yeah. Okay, Hamul. Okay, so Hamul, is that who is that? Is that Rob, by any chance? San Diego. HDV Diva. HDV Diva. Gotta love it. We've got the Kansas City, Dreddy 3. Welcome. From Kansas City. We, like I mentioned earlier, we usually get a nice little international audience on these streams as well. We should get a pretty good sized audience today. So let's see who else. I'm going to check to see who else is dropping in. Up, yep, there they all are. We've got let's see, Nuvola Blue. Welcome. And let's see who did I miss here. I know I probably missed some people here, but okay. All right, so everybody's slowly jumping in here. Okay, now let me just check one little thing. We're going to get rocking and rolling. There we go. Okay, cool. All right, so, okay, Car Stortebaker, welcome. Welcome to the Photoshop Users Group. We are featuring an incredible artist, and Mr. Mitchell, who actually runs Drumroll Studios. You probably see a lot of his work posted on various Facebook groups. And there's a sense of heart to his work, and a sense of humor to his work. I have always found. So I thought, you know what, John would be a great guy to kind of to bring on board. The title of today's presentation is going to be creating small worlds, and John's going to kind of take you through his whole workflow on how he creates, how he organizes his images, where he gets his ideas from, and his techniques in Photoshop for pulling it all together. So he's going to get to share with you today how he gets to actually just organize all these things, adjust his lighting so they looks realistic, and that's really one of the key things when we starting to use compositing techniques is how do we make everything look like that they're integrated into one piece. Really, what he's doing is illustration, right? Illustration utilizing photography. So I hope everybody will have a lot to learn from John. And without further ado, John, why don't you go ahead and take it away?
All right. Well, hello and good morning. So my name is John. I am the artist behind Drumroll Studios, and I am based out of Seattle, Washington, just a little bit north of Seattle. And I have been doing photography and illustration. I've actually been an artist as far as drawing, like pen and pencil and paper, since I was about 3. And it wasn't until about 2008 that I eventually invested in a decent camera, a good camera. The first camera I ever bought was a Rebel XTI, which was, I think at the time, about a $600 camera. But the reason I purchased it was because I was going on a trip overseas to London. It was my first time overseas, and I really wanted to have a good camera to take pictures with, because at that point in time, cell phone cameras were not very good, and I just didn't have any good options. So I just kind of dove in and got a camera. And it wasn't until about 2 years later I started really using Photoshop and decided that I wanted to, try and really get good at it for a variety of reasons, just so I could have better images. And I wanted to create movie-style posters, like the ones you see hanging up in the cinema. And so I just decided to try and get really good at Photoshop. And I didn't have any official courses or any classes or anything like that. A lot of it was experimenting and pressing buttons and seeing what did work and what didn't work, and a lot of watching what other people did as far as the Flickr groups that I was involved in. I was a big Flickr proponent back in the day for about 2 or 3 years. And being involved in Flickr really opened my eyes to the different styles that people bring and the different tricks and tactics that people use for their pictures. A lot of it was very simple, but it looks really difficult from the outside before you actually get to using the different layers and figuring out how to composite. And a lot of it's just planning your shots more carefully, more creatively. That way, when you get to the editing, it's not as difficult. So one of the things I have learned as far as the gear that you use, a lot of it really doesn't depend on the camera. I know a lot of people put a lot of stock in having a really good camera or having really expensive lenses, but most of it, if you can match your perspective and your lighting, there are a lot of things, especially nowadays with the cell phone cameras that we have, that you can just do with a couple of simple images, and putting them together, you can create a fairly stunning and realistic image that can be really entertaining to people. So a few of the things I wanted to just sort of demonstrate, just show a few of the images over the years that I have created, so that people who aren't familiar with my work can check them out. This was the first image that I had ever done in this particular style of small and big objects in the exact same picture. And this was 2010, if I remember right. I don't actually have the Photoshop file for this one, unfortunately, but I did have I still had the original image off of Flickr. And this is only I think it's one shot of the bottle, one shot of me pretending like I'm climbing a rope, and then the reflection that you see in the bottle right beneath my boots is actually the same image of me climbing. It's just flipped, and I think it's slightly warped, possibly. Like, this was a very big experiment for me as far as figuring out what to do with layers and how to make them, what was in my head, come out on screen. And I had drawn a sketch of this ahead of time to try and figure out what I needed to plan out and what I needed to shoot. And this was obviously not a a big production. It was several, a couple of different shots in the same area and the same lighting. That way I could match all of that. And then the real trick was in the editing later on. The rope, quote unquote, that I am climbing is actually all digital. There was nothing really there. If you zoom in really close, you can see that it's basically just 2 or 3 different shades of brown that have been drawn in. And I would probably do it a little different now, but this was, 10 years ago. So at the time, it was my only option. I didn't really know what else to do. I didn't want to use real rope because I figured that the tension on it wouldn't be the same. So I just tried to hold my hands in a specific way. And if I remember right, I took a lot of pictures of both myself and the bottle just to make sure I had lots of options to work with. And when I first uploaded this, there were several people that were asking me how in the world I had done it. And they were just so curious. And I told them I just kind of messed around and came up with it. I wasn't following a particular pattern or any kind of tutorial. I hadn't really seen anything like this for myself at that time. I had seen a couple of images people had done, but nothing that was like a step-by-step walkthrough. So I didn't really know, and I just decided that I was gonna try and do it on my own. And over the years after that, there were a couple more that I tried here and there. This is another one that I did with a very small, probably a 7 or 8 inch tall hourglass that has dragon statue elements on it. And again, it was just 1 or 2 shots of each thing and 1 or 2 shots of myself. You can actually see in my left hand, if you zoom in, or if you notice, there's a remote in my hand. I didn't even Photoshop that out. I probably should have, but you couldn't really tell unless you knew what you were looking for. And this image, same as with the Jameson bottle one, it was just something I had kind of had an idea for and tried to make work as far as the lighting and the shadows. And this was about probably 2011, maybe late 2011, early 2012. So I had only made a couple of these images at that time, and it really wasn't something I was known for and or that stuck, I guess. But it was a good indicator for me that not only did I really enjoy this because they're kind of whimsical in a way, they're very, it's almost like just a normal situation for that person, but it's just an extraordinary environment for them, like taking something that's really big and making it small, as in myself. With the Jameson bottle, it was taking me and making me much, much smaller to be on the bottle. Same with this, it's a normal sized image of the hourglass, but then it's making me much, much smaller. And the difficulties in that were often the lighting and just matching the focus, because it was definitely a learning process for me, because there were several shots that I got where the focus was far too thin and then things were fuzzy on the larger sized item, but on myself they were way too sharp, so that visually you could tell that something wasn't quite matching up. So over time I just learned to do a little bit different as far as my planning and my setup. Sometimes even going as far as to sketch out an idea ahead of time and get the elements that I needed to sort of round it up. That way when I actually got to shooting, I could make as few mistakes as possible. That was at least the idea, the plan. But again, at this time, I hadn't really been watching any kind of tutorials or seen anything that anybody else had done. I was just kind of thinking of an idea and then trying to plan out and go step by step with how I would create from beginning to end an image. And most of the time, even with my artwork from when I was young, almost everything in my head doesn't translate to the finished product exactly how I've seen it. It's always usually a variation of it. But I've learned and tried to just be happy with what I've created rather than, kicking yourself for not coming up with exactly what you had planned. I've never really had that happen for me, and I encourage other people not to get so caught up on the idea that you're unhappy with what you're creating. Sometimes it can be a very different creature than what you're expecting it to be. But the important part is that you're doing it. You're actually putting in the work and trying to create something. I can go and show some more images, or I could wait till later for more of that. What do you think, Stephen?
I think it's great. I love the direction you're going through, and some of the insights that you're sharing with everybody. Can you share more of some of your pieces, completed pieces?
Yeah. Yeah, I was just going back to these first two were from back almost 10 years ago. I think the first one was 2010 and this was 2011. this is a jump to a different style of thing. This is one that I didn't do with a person subject in it necessarily, but a few years ago I got into shooting with toys as well, because that also presented a challenge in taking something that was very much, much smaller and trying to place it into a larger environment. So usually when I get an idea, I try to write it down. I've got a fairly large running list of things that if I get just the slightest inkling of an idea of, this would be funny or this would be a cool thing to do, or sometimes even if it's just I can't figure out how I would shoot it, that usually challenges me to like, okay, well now I need to figure out how to do it. If it's making me kind of curious, like I don't know how I would shoot it, that's automatically very attractive to me because I want to challenge myself and I want to, I like embracing a challenge even if it doesn't turn out how I wanted it to. So for this in particular, it was a Star Wars toy. It's a TIE fighter that's probably 7 or 8 inches tall and maybe 8 or 9 inches wide. And I decided to go over to my local grocery store, and there was a particular spot in the parking lot that was empty with 2 or 3 parking spots that were empty. And so I decided that would be my background shot. So I took the TIE fighter over there and shot it in the exact same light, same direction, tried to make sure it was from a lower perspective. That way it matched up with everything else that was there. And this was several years ago. I think I do a couple of things different now. There's just, little tweaks and touches that I can see spotting an image from years ago.
What would you do differently on this one?
For this one, the biggest thing to me that I would want to change is there's a shadow over here on the red truck. There's a shadow on the ground that, in my opinion, just because of the way the lighting is, it doesn't go far enough.
Right.
I think at the time I might have stopped short of the red truck just because I didn't know exactly how to make the shadow go up onto the truck and make it look convincing.
Exactly.
But you can tell from the right side of the TIE fighter that the shadow would actually be a lot longer. And it would probably, just because of the size of it, because of how big the wings are, how tall they are, that to me it just doesn't sell it with 100% realism because the shadow doesn't stretch all the way across to the red truck. It would be slightly shadowing it.
Right.
So to me that would be the biggest thing. I would probably do something a little bit different with the clouds now as well. But again, that was, it's all a matter of taste. I don't really think there's a completely right or wrong way to do just about anything with editing, as long as that's what the person really wanted to do.
And what store is that?
That is a Fred Meyer in Linwood. North of Seattle.
Okay, yeah. I don't think we have them down here.
You don't have those down here?
I don't think so. I never seen it.
Oh, interesting. It's like a Safeway or a QFC. It's just a little bit more of a little bit of everything. It's a home and food and all that stuff. It's just all combined. It's not simply a grocery store. It was the closest place nearby that I knew had a large parking lot, and at that point in the day wouldn't be too occupied. So I had a pretty good shot that there would be at least 2 or 3 spots that the TIE fighter could be a jerk and take up. And there have been several people who have asked whether or not, if I know a friend who makes large TIE fighters or something along that, because it was, at first glance, I think it might have been convincing enough to them. They didn't understand that it was a toy. And the shadows and such had been photoshopped and faked.
So a question, how did you do the lighting on the TIE fighter itself to match it? Did you actually took an incandescent light source or a flashlight or something to match the lighting in the scene?
No, so the shot of the parking lot, I actually took the TIE fighter over to the parking lot, had it in my car with me.
There you go. That would do it.
The shot of the parking lot.
Yeah, that would do it.
I think I laid down on the ground, or I might have just knelt down just so I could get a much lower perspective.
That's great.
But I just set the TIE fighter right in the parking spot, and I made sure that the sun was hitting it on I guess it would be its left side, our right side.
Right, and that way the TIE fighter would absorb all the colors and all the ambient colors around it and the proper lighting and so forth. Very good. Exactly.
Yeah, you matched the shadow patterns and all of that just to make sure that it was facing the same way that the sun would have been from that angle. So it was pretty much just matching shooting the same direction and making sure that my perspective was lower, and then the editing was pretty simple. The shadow that you can see on the right side from the car is actually fake. There wasn't an actual shadow there. And the shadow that's falling across the actual TIE fighter body itself from the wing was also just because I had it lined up so it would be the same direction as the parking lot was. So a lot of it was just planning to make sure I was shooting at the same direction and then getting low enough that the perspective was close enough to matching. I don't know if it's exactly matching, but it was close enough to eyeball, for me at least, that I knew it would be a convincing look.
All right, very, very cool.
So yeah, this is a little bit jumping around. I think the TIE Fighter was from 2016 or 17.
Okay.
So it was a little bit newer than some of the older ones I had been showing earlier, but this is kind of and then this is the promo image for the workhorse for today. This was one of those images that it didn't start out as big. I didn't have it zoomed in as much originally in my head. But the idea was that I would be cleaning. I think it just came to me when I was cleaning my lenses one day, just cleaning and getting them ready. And I thought it would be really funny to do a shot where the camera was just huge and there was this little tiny lens cleaner guy that was cleaning the front. And then from there it developed where he wasn't just cleaning with a rag, he actually had a squeegee, like you would find at the gas station or something along those lines. And then once I had set up to shoot the image itself, I realized that if I shot it with my camera as the subject, I wouldn't be able to take the picture of it with the camera that I needed because I wanted a high quality image. So I decided to use one of my backup cameras that I use for a lot of slow motion video. And I have an adapter for my Canon lenses. So I attached that on there, which is why some people are always, they always bring up you can see that the Lumix GH, I think it's a GH4, they're curious why I used that for it. So that it was just simply a matter of necessity. It wasn't that I deliberately wanted to use the Lumix, but I did want to use the 50 millimeter lens because I thought it was a really cool lens and it was very picturesque and it just made it seem larger than life.
Do you have a favorite lens?
It really depends on the subject of the shot. I've got two lenses that I would say I get the most use out of. Both of them are Canon lenses. One of them is a 24 to 105 millimeter, which is just a really good all-around lens, and I find that I use it for a lot of portraiture and a lot of landscapes, and most of my composites I feel like I use that particular lens. But I also like a 70 to 300 millimeter lens. It's a 5.6, I think, Canon lens, and that one's also an excellent lens. It gives really good quality, really, really sharp, but it is a little bit more of a workhorse since it's not only heavier, but it's 5.6, I think, is the lowest when it's fully extended, when it's fully zoomed out. So you have a lot less to work with as far as lighting goes, and you have to, compensate for that by either having a slower shutter speed or there's just various things you have to adjust for that makes it a little bit more tricky to use for portraits and for normal photography like this. I really do like the 50 millimeter that is in this picture as well, but it tends to be one that you have to back up quite a bit from your subject if you want to get everything in frame. So it isn't as versatile
as the 1.4? Is that the 1.4 lens?
I believe it's the 1.2. 50 millimeter 1.2.
1.2.
Yeah,
okay.
It's right on the top of the lens.
All right, yeah, you paid some money for that one.
Yeah, that was a hefty purchase. I was a little bit nervous when I pressed the buy now button.
I was nervous about the hefty purchase I spent on what was it? It was a polarizing filter, $160. I thought that was bad.
Yeah, there are some of those where you're like, do I really need this? And as long as you can justify it, like they're really useful tools and they're really cool. But yeah, some of those out there, it's pretty spendy.
But I mean, when you spend the money, it's like, gosh, I'm glad I did it, because when you look at the quality that you get from spending that, it's really it's world's difference. Yeah,
it does make a big difference, and it really helps with as long as you know how to use them in and out with your images. It really helps your workflow, your creativity. It just feels like it's like a musician playing on a much better instrument than just whatever he has laying around. Like, it just makes you more creative and more artistic.
Yep.
So for this image in particular, this small lens cleaner, I have a sort of a breakdown of before and after on my Facebook page of it, and several people have asked, like, why I was in socks and why, how I did the reflection and things like that. And at the time when I was making this, I didn't really honestly think it was going to be as popular of an image as it has been, but this is one of the more prolific images that I've ever created. There are probably 2 or 3 that I would say are the ones that I am most known for, and this one in particular, for whatever reason, just the day that I posted it, it just blew up, and there were so many people asking me how I had done, this little thing and this little thing, and it's actually a very simple composite. It was just the shot of the camera. It was me standing in my living room with the same type of lighting. I wanted to make sure that it was coming from the same direction, same as with the parking lot. There are no modifiers in this at all. It's all natural light just coming through the window. And it was just me standing in my living room with my the squeegee up. And it wasn't until after, probably about 5 to 10 minutes after I had taken the shots and figured I was done, I was going to wrap up, I remembered that if I was going to have a reflection in the camera, I needed to make sure that it was truly inverted. And I wasn't going to get the right kind of reflection if I just took myself and doubled it, because you would still be looking at my back rather than my front. So I had to go back and set up the camera on the tripod that I had just taken it off of. And then I set up everything and made sure it was still in the pretty much the same place. And then I probably, just to be safe, I probably took 6 to 8 shots of me holding up the squeegee and making sure that my hands were changed, so that way it was correct as far as the angle and what would be reflecting in the glass. And the only one thing that you can tell is any different, just because I wasn't shooting in a real reflection, is that the tattoos on my right arm don't match the tattoos on my left arm in the reflection. They're actually switched. But you would have to know my tattoos pretty well to even know that was a thing. And then once I was done with the shooting of the images, it was really, really simple to put them together. All I had to do was kind of match up the size and perspective of the 2 shots of me, and then just make it so the squeegee almost touched.
Now,
one just slightly behind the other.
Now, Ruscular 3D has a question. And this question is, have you done 3D stereo shooting?
No, I have not. I have dabbled with the idea. There was one time a couple of years ago where a friend of mine had a full 360, I forget what it was called. It was a camera that took 360-degree shots, and then you could look at them on your phone and actually move your phone around. And my brain right away started figuring out how I could make a photoshopped image where you could sort of be in the middle of that image, and everywhere you turned, you would see it all around you. But a couple of tests that I tried with his particular camera, it just didn't, maybe it was just me not fully understanding how to implement that particular technology, but it was too difficult to figure out how to edit something after it had been taken. It was really cool for if you're out in the countryside or somewhere like that, to take a 360-degree shot. But as far as how to edit it once you've taken it, I couldn't quite figure out how to do that. I'd like to take another stab at it, but I would probably have to have a very different camera or a different setup, or maybe even just watch some videos or something to figure out how somebody else does it. I have seen a couple of the 360-degree images where they are edited. I think there was one with a dinosaur, a raptor, or a T-Rex or something like that, that once you turned your phone all the way around or turned the 360-degree image around, it basically was like a T-Rex was leaning over you and breathing right into your face, and it was really, really cool. I have no idea how they did it. I would like to do that kind of thing at some point in time. It seems like it'd be a really challenging process, but it also looks like it'd be fairly exhausting for the amount of detail and probably the amount of computer strain that would put on your PC. Were there any other questions anybody wanted?
Let's see. Let's see. Rescuer 3D is mentioning that he uses the Fujifilm 3D stereo camera, even though it's not the 360 degree cam, but basically no questions.
Okay. I didn't know if anybody else had something on this particular image or not.
Nope.
I know you had asked before we started recording on why I was wearing the socks.
Yeah.
And that was simply that was just an oversight on my part. I was just, had an idea for an image. I thought I would shoot it that day, and then I just did. And now it's probably the one thing that people comment on the most on this image whenever they see it is, why are you wearing socks? But, at the time, you just have to plan ahead, I guess, for what you're going to be looking like in the future. Years later, people are going to be asking you why you're wearing socks in a picture.
Yeah, but you learn from these things, though. As you do one, you hear comments, so you do the next one, you start to think completely different. You start to really think about, why am I doing this? Okay, should the person be clothed, or unclothed, or partially clothed, and why? And does it fit in with the story? So it's interesting.
Yeah, and that for me, with almost all of the tiny to big images that I have done, I always want to come from a point of view where it's a very common, everyday thing in that little person's life. Like most of the time I'm playing a character that's just doing something mundane, like cleaning up, a food spill, or cleaning a camera lens, or just hanging out on a table, or, it's nothing specifically exciting, or you're not on some great adventure. It's just kind of them hanging out. So with the clothing thing, sometimes that features into it where I'm just like, I'll just wear something comfortable that makes it look like the character isn't, trying too hard. You don't want to sit around your kitchen table with a tuxedo on. But it also does make you think about, like we were just saying with the socks. It's just something you kind of plan for in the future to be like, oh, okay, maybe, next time I'll put on boots of some kind, or shoes, or, something like that, just so it helps maybe make the image a little less distracting. But at the same time, I think it is funny that this image looks it's almost overly relaxed. He's just hanging out in his socks, cleaning a camera lens that's probably going to get dusty again right away.
Okay, now Bluebeard62 has a question. Wait, actually, let me back up a little bit. You have a couple questions here. Let me start with the first one. Ahi Ab says, when shooting, do you have a scale in mind, such as 1/4 or 1:1 or so forth?
Oh, interesting. I don't actually have a particular scale in mind. Sometimes I will try and match, if I am making myself much smaller, sometimes I'll try and just match whatever the object is, and that can be anything from probably 1/12 to 1/6 scale, somewhere in there, but it's never a set thing. It always depends on the item in particular. And even then, once I've shot some things, I will notice that either I will make the thing a little bit smaller, like I'll shrink it down a little bit just to make it match up a little better, or I'll make little tweaks and changes here and there. So there's no specific set size that I go for. So it always depends on the image.
So basically, the objects in your scene are probably 1:1 to one another, in relationship to one another, but you're the only, your person is the only adjustment in the whole concept.
Yeah, that's almost, I would say, pretty much all of them. There might be a couple here and there that I'm kind of forgetting, but I think pretty much everything else is 1:1. And the guy, the objects that I'm making bigger or making myself smaller, it usually is fed by the idea of the story. That's usually kind of informed on that.
Okay.
And so if I'll make myself much smaller for some blueberries, which you'll see an image of later on, that was just depending on how big it felt, as far as the if the blueberries were way too big or if they were way too small. I would just kind of modify my particular size once I was editing to just where it felt like it was about the right size comparison for what I wanted.
All right, now Bluebeard62, his or her question is, how do you get the perspective for your self-portraits?
So that is something that it's hard to describe, because it's almost like an intuitive thing that comes with experience. Early on, when I was doing shots like this, I would take several different angles, several different perspectives, and try and make sure that I would try and get from the images themselves. I would try and make sure everything was perfect right off the bat. And I found out that it's really hard to get the exact perspective. The best thing that I learned to do was try and get the same direction, same angle. So if I'm doing something same as this, the Lumix camera here, with the camera that I was shooting this, I got all the way to the floor, and then I even slightly tilted the camera back towards the ceiling. That way you get that slightly looking upward angle to it. But the camera was as close to the floor as I could possibly get it, just resting it on the floor and then tilting it back. And then once I shot the image of myself, I made sure that it was on a tripod. It wasn't at an extremely lower setting, because then otherwise it would stretch me out since I'm much taller than the camera. But I made sure to get a fairly flat angled shot. And then occasionally, if I find out that I've made a mistake, even if it's just slight in Photoshop, I will edit where I will do the perspective warp just slightly on either the top or the bottom of the image, whatever is going to make it line up a little bit more realistically. But for the most part, when I am shooting nowadays, I don't remember exactly how it was like years ago when I was doing it, but nowadays I can kind of just eyeball something and figure out whether or not I need to have the camera angled much higher or much lower. I always try and make sure I get everything of the subject in the frame. I think that that's really, really important. You can make a lot of modifications afterwards if you really need to, but if you don't have all of your subject in the frame at the time of shooting, you're going to have a problem later on if you try and adjust anything because you were missing part of your subject or of your environment even. And then you have to figure out how to clone something in, or if you had enough shots of it to put a little piece in to help.
And that is it on the questions.
Okay. Well, I think unless there was anything else on this one, we can move on from this image. Ooh. So this is probably the one image that I am most known for. This was a contest submission back in 2011, and this was probably my fourth or fifth time doing something like this where it was messing with sizes. And the biggest inspiration behind it was one of my favorite artists, MC Escher, has done a lot of stuff like this. He was a surreal artist, and he did a lot of pen and pencil and watercolor pictures that really messed with perspectives and with sizes, and he's just a really, really interesting brain. I always liked his work, and when the idea came to me to be drawing myself on the piece of paper, I didn't know how to do it. I honestly was kind of stumped for a little while, and I had a couple of ideas in my head, and when I finally went to go and shoot this image, it was two shots. There's one of me with the board on my lap, and I'm drawing with my pen on an actual piece of paper. And then the very next shot, I got a camera, put it on the tripod, and I angled it slightly down where I was sitting on the same deck that I had taken this picture in. And I made sure that I was looking up at the camera so that it was, the perspectives matched and the angles matched. And then when I was doing the editing, all I did was I added a new layer, and I started drawing in on top of the picture of me where I was sitting. And then once I had drawn in enough that I thought it looked like a pretty decent pen or ink drawing, I went back in and I started masking out the actual photograph of me sitting there. That way all it was left was the boots and the pants, so it looked like it was in the process of being finished. And then the shadows underneath the hands are something that I would probably do different now because they don't quite line up with the shadow that's coming from the pen. They're a little bit conflicting there, but that's one of those things that you notice later on that you would just change if you had a little bit more experience, I guess, or a little bit more knowledge.
So your shadow is on a separate layer, right?
What's that?
Your shadow is on a separate layer, correct?
Yes, the shadow that's coming down the legs and coming from both of the hands are the same layer. I just decided to add one layer to avoid any confusion in case, it didn't match up 100% right.
Okay.
And yeah, that would be the third or fourth layer, I think. And then once I had put this all together, I was going to make the top part where it's all black. I was going to basically crop that out and bring it further down. But the only other option I really had, just because that's the way I had shot it with the paper, which is kind of goes back to what I was just saying a little bit ago about, making sure you get everything of your subject in the shot. It made it, the crop just felt too weird. Something about it really bugged me. So I decided to leave it like that and leave that kind of negative area or open space at the top. And once I had finished, this was actually the winner of a contest that Redbubble had and that Sony had called Imaginify. And it was the winner back in 2011 of a contest that I think, if I remember, it was worldwide. And it was a really surreal moment when they called me, and I thought it was a spam call or something like that. And they wanted to know where they could send the congratulatory winning cards. And I think I was up on YouTube, the top YouTube banner for the day. It was a really cool time, really interesting thing. But again, it was not something that I expected. It was just kind of an image and an idea that I had, but apparently it resonated with a lot of people. So I wish I still had the Photoshop layer of this particular one, the Photoshop project, because I would like to actually break it down and see all the individual little pieces and parts. But back then in 2011 or 2012, I wasn't very good about keeping anything or keeping any kind of records or files. Once I was done with something, I would usually just try and remove it from my hard drive. So
right. Rusker made a comment about paying attention to hard and sharp edges for shadows.
Yes. And same for the color in this particular shadow that's coming from my hand. Like, it's very blue and almost purple as it gets higher up. And the shadows that are for me are not that way at all.
Right.
So it's very conflicting. But, for the time that it was out, did a pretty good job.
Well, now with your skill level sets at the stage that they are now, it's an opportunity for you to go back and redo this piece. And this time save the files.
That's true. It's very true. I have been told by several people that I should go back and redo some older images, and I'm kind of two schools of thought on that, because I understand the desire to go back and fix something or change something, but I also think that sometimes you need to not necessarily walk away from, but once you're finished with something, just kind of leave it for what it is rather than keep trying to touch it up, because you could spend years just keeping like, no, I didn't do it right this time either. I'm going to go back and do it again. And for me, at least, that gets a little bit creatively stifling if you're constantly trying to make up for past mistakes, I guess.
I find that I find that I go back to old image maybe a year or two later after I've worked on other stuff.
Yeah, definitely. And there are some images that I've over time that I've redone because I've looked at them later on and been like, oh, it would be a really cool thing to do it this way this time, and actually have a bit of a difference in it's almost like an interpretation or like a remake of an image rather than simply going back and fixing something.
Right.
All right. So moving on. Maybe.
Definitely move on.
Yeah. So this is another image from this is probably 2012. And no, it's probably a little bit later now, maybe 2013 or 2014. But I decided one day that I was going to play a prank on a friend of mine who's really into motorbikes. And I had come across a small, I think it was a 1/12 scale Harley Davidson toy, and it was really, really detailed. I don't remember the name of the company now, but it was very finely detailed, and it looked very real. And so I decided I was going to play a prank on him and tell him that I had found somebody who was getting rid of this. They were just throwing this bike out, and I didn't know anything about it, and I told him, some specs on it, because I'm not a big bike guy, but he is, so I knew that he would freak out as soon as he saw that somebody was throwing this away. And so he messaged me and basically was like saying, I'll give you whatever you want for it, and make sure to bring it over to my house. And it was a toy that I had photoshopped myself on simply to fool him. And a couple of other people had noticed as well and commented that they wanted the bike as, they wanted to keep it too. And then I waited, I think, a couple of hours before I showed him a picture of me holding the bike in the palm of my hand, and that it wasn't a full-size bike after all. It was just a toy. And then it was probably, I don't know, maybe an hour or two after that some people started noticing that you can tell that there's blur on the back tire, and there's a little bit of blur towards the front tire because I didn't have my my field of focus. I didn't have it wide enough to actually capture that in focus as well. But if you just look at it really quickly, a lot of people were fooled into believing that it was a full-size bike, when in reality all it was me just slightly crouching in the street with I didn't have any seat or anything like that. I just slightly made a squat so that it looked kind of like I was sitting on something, and then I photoshopped the bike in underneath me and around me.
That's clever.
And again, this was one of those things where there's no light modifiers. I didn't have any flashes set up. I just tried to go for simple and effective and use the same setting with the same light and the same angle for both shots, both of me and of the toy. And there's the toy. This is the image that I sent him afterwards. And he had a good laugh about it, but he was also kind of sad and disappointed that I hadn't found him an awesome new bike. So this is the setup for an image. I grabbed a few before I've actually done any editing on them. This was an image for a piece of pie. I think it was Pie Day a couple of years ago. It might have been 2017 or 2018. And there was this, I think it was a blueberry blackberry pie that one of the friends had made for me, and it was an interesting idea that came into my head to make a picture of a little guy with a fork, and he was just about ready to dive into the pie and have a feast. And so I had set it up with some stuff in the background, just random, normal stuff. I didn't try and get too extreme with props, keeping it simple. And then I set up a plate and the pie and made sure it was in focus. And then I decided that for this one in particular, I wanted to make sure that the perspective was fairly close. So I got this is a 1/12 inch Star Wars figure that I had set up because I wanted to see how the light affected it, how the shadows were on the table, whether or not there was reflection in the bottom side of the plate that curves down here, and just to see overall, how the figure would stand in the image, because I wanted to be informed on that later on when I edited myself in. So I had done that, and let's see if... So there is there's the image of the toy by itself, and then I had a shot of just the pie, just the plate by itself as well. I wanted to make sure to get isolated shots, and I take probably anywhere from 3 to 7 shots most of the time anymore, just to make sure I've got good focus, good perspective, and that in case anything lighting wise changes, I have options to choose from as far as the editing. There's nothing worse than when you finally get down to editing and you're compiling your images and trying to figure out what you have and what you don't have as far as a good look or a line of sight, and discovering that you need to go and reshoot it. That sucks. And I personally hate that. So I try to make sure that if I'm going to take the time to set up things and shoot, that I'm getting everything I need and more from that particular shoot. That way, even if it's not 100% what I had in my head, I can still make a decent image out of whatever I've gone to shoot, whatever the process is. For this particular image, I don't remember how many lights. I know I had at least one flash that is to the camera's right that is bouncing off the wall and ceiling, and I made sure to leave that in place for all of the shots that I took so that the lighting was all coming from the same direction, and in case anything got any particular kinds of shine, that it would all match later on. So this is the isolated shot of the fork just being propped up by a cuff, just so I can have something to illuminate it from. I didn't want it sitting right on the table because I figured that would make some shadows and possibly make it a difficult editing process later on. And once I had isolated all of those images, I set up the same lights, and you can see on the wall right behind me here where it's really bright, it's bouncing off of the wall there. That way it matches everything I've already taken. And this is just me standing in my kitchen living room area and making sure that I'm looking down at the plate and trying to hold my arms. At first I was holding my left arm a little too low, and thankfully I had taken 3 or 4 different shots, and I had moved both of my arms in various positions and heights just to make sure that if I needed to, I could match up the fork later on. And if I remember right, I even used puppet warp a little bit on my left arm to bring the hand up a little higher for the back end of the fork. But it was close enough with this one that I knew this was the image I wanted to use for the finished shot. Where is it? There it is. And this is the final image. Once I put it all together and masked out the fork, masked out myself and the plate. I made some slight adjustments to where I was standing. You can see that even though I was standing on flat ground in the original shot of myself, I moved it so that my right leg is inside the plate this time and is a little bit higher as if I'm stepping up into the plate. That was just using puppet warp a little bit and making sure that my leg was a little bit shorter so it pulls up. And then there's 2 or 3 layers of shadow added. One of them is underneath the hands, both the top and bottom, so that you get that little bit of the shadow falling where the light wouldn't be hitting since it's coming off the wall behind. And then there's a little bit of shadow underneath my left foot that is drawing towards the plate.
I think you should do another version of this where you like in the blueberries with the blueberry sauce all over your face and your body.
That sounds like quite the mess.
I mean, to me,
all Photoshop.
You want to get into that and eat it.
Yeah, that would be a fun one too. You could just be sitting inside the blueberry pie, just having a feast.
Now, see, this is interesting. Somebody just made a comment on here. It's Sub Chris. Oh my gosh, what the hell is this? Sub to Chrysomundary your bed? What? Whatever. Okay. All right. So your comment is the same comment I had made to John. Basically, it says he sounds like such a sweet, nice guy, but looks like he would fuck you up and mess you. That was the same comment I told John when we talked the other night. Kind of like, you look rough, but you like a really nice guy. Look at your images. I could tell you like a really nice guy. Really fun stuff.
Yeah, I hear that fairly often. It's nothing unusual. There have been several people over the years that have looked at. I mean, again, it really depends on which images you look at, because I do have some pretty scary and disturbing images as well. I do a lot of horror photography, but the ones that seem to resonate the most with people are the cute ones like this, or something that's a little bit more whimsical and funny.
Right.
And even with images like this, like obviously I have kind of a disturbing sense of humor, but it's always from a point that I'm trying to experience a picture from the person's point of view. Like the little guy in this is just, he probably stumbled upon this massive pie that, he shouldn't even be eating. He's probably stealing this at the time. But it's just something that to me is fun. It's challenging for me to do, and it seems to be one of those images that, people learn a lot from, and then they see a different side of me rather than just assuming, like most people tend to. I mean, it's just fairly common. But I'm probably a mean guy, and where I just do scary stuff all the time.
So Faye Barsh has mentioned that she likes the scary ones the best.
Yeah, sounds like Faye. Around Halloween time, when I do a lot of the, like a scary series or something like that, she's usually the one that's commenting like, "This is awesome, I love this," and it's always been a little surprising to me because she doesn't seem like she's that way either. But obviously, we both have similar tastes in horror pictures.
And for anybody who's just joining us, this is the Photoshop users group. We have a site on Facebook. I think we're about 33K and strong or and growing. So welcome everybody. We've got time. We'll take a break in about 30 minutes. We've got about 30 minutes just to kind of let you know. And then we'll take a 15-minute break and we'll come back and do the other half of the meeting. But this is compositing techniques featuring John Mitchell from Drumroll Studios. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask. You're getting comments here from people saying that the work seems amazing. They're really enjoying it. So, okay, go for it.
Awesome. Glad to hear it. One of the last notes I was going to make on this image before we moved on was the I was finished editing, and I was just about ready to. I think I'd already even saved it, like we tend to do, where we save a copy and then save another copy once it's been revised and so on. But I had saved it, and I was just about to close it, and I realized that down here in the plate, I didn't have a reflection of my foot, and it didn't register at the time. Like when I was shooting, I didn't actually get a separate image of that. It was more of a idea that it would probably be reflecting in real life if this was a real image of a little guy with a spoon ready to eat some pie. So I had grabbed one of the other alternate shots that I had of myself where my foot was slightly turned a little bit more towards the camera so you could see more of the side of it. And I simply isolated that foot by itself and then photoshopped it into the plate. Made sure to mask it so it was a little bit see-through, because you wouldn't get a super solid contrasted object like that. And then I made sure to match up the shadow as well that came from the foot. And as soon as I had done that, the image to me was 100% done. Like it was one of those things where like, okay, that makes sense now. And I have that happen often through my images. I'll notice like a little detail, like a reflection or even just a spill of light around the camera or something that just, it feels a little bit off without that element being introduced. So it's little things like that I've learned to try and just keep my eye open for, and make sure that if there is a reflective surface or if there's a place where a shadow would or would not fall. Some of it's just experience and learning how to introduce elements that maybe weren't 100% natural, but they make the shot feel better, they make the shot look better. Just little things like that I've learned over time, that if I can find a way to include those, they seem to make the image complete.
Oh.
And for me at least, it made the picture having that little reflection in there, even if it's something that most people don't even think about or notice. If it wasn't there, I think they would jump out at them.
So a comment from, just to let you know, a comment from Illuma Graphics said that this is amazing. And Rescuer 3D says, reminds him of the Book of Gnomes. And just as a note for everybody who's here attending, thank you so much for being here. This is the Photoshop Users Group. You are live on our Twitch presentation page. So do me a favor and make sure that you follow me. So there's a follow button on Twitch. So when you click that button, it's going to allow you, every time that we go live here, you'll be notified. Okay, it's free to do. Just make sure you join Twitch free, and then follow this particular site. Okay, that was it.
Okay. All right, so moving on to another image. This was probably 2015 or 2016, somewhere around there. And again, it was one of those very simple ideas. I think I was playing games, and I thought it would be really funny if I was playing against a Master Chief figure from Halo. And so I set up the camera in my living room. It's a very simple shot. The only thing that I couldn't figure out for a little while was how to make a glow from the TV. I wanted to have that very stereotypical glow from the TV screen. That way you could tell, even without seeing the TV, that there was light coming from it. And I went through a couple of different ideas. One of them was having the room really, really dark, and it just didn't feel right to me. So I decided that I felt like the image itself, if they were both looking the same direction, and as long as you could kind of tell they were game controllers, the theme itself or the idea would be sold enough that you wouldn't have to have that 1980s TV glow in a darkened room kind of feel. So I set up the shot of myself holding a controller, and then I set the Master Chief toy pretty much the same angle, pretty much the same perspective, and made sure the focus was good on him and such. And then I just took a separate shot of a controller to put in his hands afterwards, because I didn't have anything that looked enough like a controller that was his particular scale. I think it's 1/12 scale is what he is. So I decided to just Photoshop an Xbox controller into his hand later on. And the light that is coming off the wall that they are looking at is actually a small flash that's just bouncing straight off of a white wall.
Interesting.
About the same size and angle of a TV.
Now I'm not seeing their heads. Could you scroll down a little bit to see their heads? There we go. That's it. There they are. Yeah,
It was cut off.
Yeah, we were only seeing their knees.
Oh. All right. Well, as long as you can see everything, just let me know if that happens again. I can't see that
There
on
we
my
go.
screen. So.
Yeah, there we go. Now we see your heads.
Okay. Awesome.
Cool.
So yeah, again, it was a very simple shot. I think it's just 3 images. I didn't even have to really do anything with shadows in this one, as far as making it look like he was on the couch was pretty simple. And the light that's spilling across the toy's right leg is just because the light was bouncing off the TV at the same perspective and same angle. So a lot of that was just helping sell the shot by having him in there. So this is another one that was size. It was a different approach to the size thing that I've done over the years, and most of the time I'm making myself much smaller to match up to a smaller object, whether it's a toy or a piece of pie or something along those lines. And the idea came to me that I should try and do a giant version of myself and make everything else look small, which presents its own kind of a slew of problems. For this one in particular, I knew that there was a building on Capitol Hill in Seattle that I just really loved the look of, with the overgrown plants on the outside of the wall. And so there was a day that I was doing some work in the area or something. I forget exactly why I was up there, but thankfully I had my camera with me. And so I set up outside the building really quickly, and I took probably 4 or 5 shots, and I wasn't even sure 100% of what angle I wanted in particular. But from the right side of the screen all the way over to the left is actually 3 different shots of the buildings that I photoshopped together, because I couldn't get them all in the exact same frame where it wasn't making a fisheye effect, where it wasn't warping them too much. I think I had a 17 to 40 millimeter lens on at the time, and it was the only thing I had on my camera. So to get them all in frame, unfortunately, meant the buildings were slightly curving outwards towards the top and the bottom part of the lens. So to fix that, to try and keep it so that it was still looking up, but it wasn't too warped or too, I forget what the word is, convex, or whichever one it is where they're bending in. I decided to use 3 different images and Photoshop them in together. And then when I got back to my house later on in the day, I made sure that I had the sun still behind me, and I took a photo of myself with my camera all the way down the ground, angled upwards. And it was a 17 to 40 millimeter lens as well, so it was as wide open as possible. I think that way you have that very giant look to a portrait, self-portrait.
I guess I'm noticing the people in the background in the storefront next to the right of the parked car. I think it would be cool if it was staged and they were like looking up at you.
Yeah, that would have been awesome. If I had had more people in mind, that might be a good idea to do it in the future. Try and get like 3 or 4 people to be in the shots with me that can, I don't even have to Photoshop them in. They can just go stand on the street and look up, and then I could redo the whole shot.
And you can actually you can actually make that happen with a composite here. Put their heads on a separate layer and just kind of rotate them upwards.
That's true. That's true.
Cool.
But when I had got the shot of myself in front of my garage back at my place, I probably took 4 or 5 at different angles. I didn't want to make it too extreme because I didn't want it to be, I didn't want my face to be too far angled back. So What I found was when I was taking a shot, and then I would check the shot to make sure it was similar to what I knew it would need to be as far as the buildings I had already taken shots of. So since I already had the building shots,
and
really informed
your head is cut off again. We're only seeing the top part. There we go. Yeah, you gotta keep it up. There we go. There it is.
That's towards the top of the picture. I think it might just be
when you move
angle of my monitor.
Yeah, when you move your cursor up, it brings us back to the top.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's good to know.
So maybe can these be reduced smaller instead of being matched full size? Maybe kind of drop them down and see what happens.
Is that any better?
Yeah, that's better. So yeah, reduce them small so they're in the middle of your screen. That way it'll be we can see everything. Now it's still scrolling a little bit. There, make it smaller. Keep going, smaller. Keep going, keep going. Keep going, smaller. Okay, there we go. That's it. Now put it in the center of your screen. Just drag it to your center of your screen. There we go.
Is that pretty good?
Yeah, that you now went back down again. So just move. There you go. That's it. Well, it's like it's an auto scroll or something. What program are you using to show these?
I'm just using it's just photos in my.
Do you have Bridge?
Just
Do you have Bridge?
I do have.
Yeah,
Bridge.
Adobe Bridge is better. It'll definitely show everything if you can have Bridge access that folder. Thanks, Judy McLean. Yeah, I was seeing that too. Everybody's saying it's a killer image. And John had something to do with maximizing the window. It's a Windows thing. So you can maximize Bridge now. It's not going to do that on you. That's a Windows thing with So or is it? Huh.
That's interesting because it's showing that it's perfectly in the center of the screen for me, but apparently if I move my monitor or if I move my cursor, it makes it big.
Let's see what's going on here. All right, there we go. Let me do it this way for now. So I made adjustments to... Huh. All right, I made adjustments to my screen. It's going to be centered, but I think it'll be a lot better. There we go. And then if you click on one image and hit the spacebar key, that'll maximize it to your screen. There you go. Perfect. That's perfect.
Is that good?
That's good.
Okay.
Okay. That's great.
So the last thing I was just going to point out as I remembered it, since this was from years ago, when I was taking those shots of myself to make sure that my face was in view, because if I was just standing straight up and down like I thought should have been, it was too harsh of an angle as far as my face. Like you would basically see a little bit of my chest and my beard, and then that was about it as far as my face goes. So I had to actually bend over a little bit and lean towards the ground and then put my arm up. That way it made sure to match the perspective of the building.
Very cool.
So it was just one of those things where it was a good thing to check and make sure that my images were coming out similar to what I needed them, and then adjusting depending on what I needed to change to make sure. But you can't really tell in the picture that I'm leaning forward. It's just that it makes so much more sense for the rest of the image if you can see more of me than what you would have been able to with that particular lens. All right. And then okay, I was going to say, how do I get out of this now?
Hit space bar again.
So,
yeah.
Yep.
There you go.
All right. So here's another one. This is one that I actually did last year, and it was part of a Photoshop group that I'm in, and they do weekly themes. It's called the Lightbulb Project. And they usually give a fairly not obscure, but it's a very wide-ranging theme. It'll be something like light or words or something along those lines where you can take it for what you will, and everybody creates something very different. There's only been a couple of times that I've seen stuff that actually matches what somebody else has done, but it's a really cool creative space to come up with an interesting challenge for yourself, basically to interpret something even as simple as a one word into a story of sorts. And this in particular it was an idea that I'd had for a little while, but I hadn't really put a theme to, I guess. And then once the theme came up for that week in the group, I knew that I wanted to make this giant book in the middle of a forest, sort of fantasy setting, fantasy storytelling. And so I got this book and I went out and I took, I think, 5 or 6 shots of just the book itself leaning against a tree. And then a couple of myself standing in the bottom of this little forest area near my place in Linwood. And editing them together was a little bit difficult because I had not taken into account that for the angle that I was at the book, the side that is closest to the camera was a little bit out of focus. And that was one of those things that I knew it wouldn't match up to the to the finished image. As far as myself, it was okay if the farther edge was a little bit blurry or out of focus, but I wanted that closer edge to be a little bit more in focus. So the angle that I got out of it, you can tell that the words on the very far right side of the page are a little bit out of focus. They're a little bit blurry, but then the very edge of the pages is in focus is because it's a different shot. I decided to use one that was a little bit more crisp and Photoshop that in on the very outer edge of the book. And then the shadows and everything else that are added are all digital. Even the shadow underneath my feet is actually digital because at the time there wasn't harsh enough shadow on myself to match what I thought would have been as far as the lighting on the book. The rays of light that are coming in from the left are also digital. Just little things like that I wanted to add to help with the sort of the sunrise or a magical sort of feel and tone to the image. And then all of the little tiny light spots that you can see on the actual pages are just something that I did with the brush to help look like light was being filtered through the leaves and landing on the page. And before I had done that stuff, the image just felt to me, it felt like it was missing something, like it was kind of lacking something. And I don't even know if that's something that people can see and, tell right away that like, oh, this is obviously digital or not. But for me, just little details like that, same with the reflections in the plate and things like that. They're really important for me to put in there because otherwise it feels like it's not a finished picture. Even if it's not 100% technically perfect, I still like it to have those little details that that for me at least help seal and sell the image. This is one that I had done probably 2013 or 2014. And while the image is not very technically good, in my opinion, it's one of those ones that somebody wanted to know how to do a composite similar to the other ones where it's like a small me versus a regular size environment or object. And so I made this fairly quick YouTube tutorial of this. And I think it was only a 15 or 20 minute long video. I didn't want to make it too long because I didn't want to just drag on with lots of details and such. But that was one of the reasons why this looks not as good as some of the other things that I've done because it was more of a time crunch. But it was to hopefully illustrate to people that it doesn't really take a crazy amount of equipment and or lighting and just to kind of show some basic techniques of how you would put something together. And obviously you'd want to take a lot more time when you're creating something.
So
especially if it be a finished image.
So there are those socks again.
There are those socks again, I know. This is one of those images before the one with the camera, so I hadn't learned at this point in time apparently.
So that was your sock period.
Maybe in like another 40 or 50 years that'll be considered my sock period.
Okay.
As people are looking back through my gallery of images. All right. So this was another one that I did in probably 2014 or 2015. And again, was just the idea of, I think it might have been something as simple as somebody talking about a big breakfast or something along those lines. And in my head, I immediately interpreted that as being, me being super, super small and the breakfast itself being the regular sized. So this is probably just 2 or 3 images total. I do remember it was difficult trying to figure out what to put in my hands to sort of simulate a salt shaker because I didn't really have anything that wasn't either incredibly heavy or, was just not the right shape to match up to the salt shaker that I had. So eventually I had just taken 3 or 4 shots of myself holding, I think it was a long pillow. And then eventually I took 2 or 3 just as safeties where I wasn't holding anything. I just had my hands out, which is why my right hand, my bottom hand, looks like it's not quite holding anything. It's just kind of in the air because I should have curled my fingers a little bit more to help sell that particular, holding the weight of the salt shaker.
So we can probably still do that with the warp tool, huh? Yeah,
you could. And I probably should have done that here. I think I was afraid at the time of messing up my fingers too much, like moving my thumb in too much. But it's one of those things where you're trying to position and act out, and a self-portrait is sometimes it's a more difficult process because you can't really you can't separate yourself to just take the image and make sure to look at, like, if you're trying to help a model adjust themselves, or, you know, if you're trying to get a slightly different angle, you can make those kind of on the fly decisions while you're holding the camera. But once you get back in front of the camera, sometimes your brain skips a track, or at least mine does. And so I'll make little mistakes like that here and there. The shadow that's on the top part of the tortilla is digital, and the salt that's falling is actually I think it's a dust brush that I just turned to all white to make it look like it was salt. I thought about adding some shadows and such, but it wouldn't really make sense since the lighting in the image is not that harsh to have salt shadows, basically. But it was a fun one, and it's one of those images that several people have commented over time that they tried to figure out how to do it and they just couldn't. But it was a pretty simple setup.
Very cool.
All right, so back to blueberries, because they come up in my pictures fairly often. So this is one that I had shot probably 2016, 2017. And the idea, again, was just that I had just gotten some blueberry brushes not too long before, and I was really enjoying having them to eat every morning. And then I thought it'd be really funny to do a blueberry pile where I'm just sitting down having lunch. And so I took 3 shots, one of the table and the blueberries, one of myself sitting on the floor with my hands out and I'm not holding anything. And then I think I took one of just a solitary blueberry on a toothpick that was sort of suspended up in the air. And I made sure that the lighting was all the same. Again, it was just a single flash bouncing off the wall to the right. And I made sure that it was on a low enough power that it didn't blow out too much. But I did want to get that very cool shine that you get on blueberries. It's very food photography kind of a shine. And I want to make sure to have a specific light source for that. And then when I was editing them together, the only thing that people, for whatever reason, I don't know why, maybe it's just since I created it, I can see it. But over the years, I've had several people comment that I should have included a shadow from the guy on the blueberries.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always looked at the picture afterwards, and I've tried to figure out, because I can easily tell where the shadow is, because I did actually put one in there, and it's going across the 3 blueberries that come right off of his right arm.
Right.
But there are quite, I don't know why it is, but it's the thing that gets commented on the most for whatever reason. And people are like, yeah, you should have included a shadow. I'm like, well, there is a shadow there. Like, that's exactly where the shadow would fall from him. At least that's how I see it. But I don't know. It's an interesting optical illusion, I guess.
Well, they can do their own blueberry shots.
Yeah, exactly. And then the last thing I remember including in this was I was trying to figure out how to do blue, like smeared blueberry on my face. And I was actually looking at the insides of some of the blueberries, and it's very much like a sort of a brightish purple, depending on where your blueberries are from. And I didn't know how to do that on my face without just making it digital. So I decided to do that. And then I put a few smears on my forehead too, as if I've basically just thrust my face into the blueberry and chewed down on that. And I suppose what you were saying with the pie and such later on, if I ever do a shot like that again, I might just decide to get messy and have to clean it up. That way it's 100% real.
That's right.
Just figure out how to get that much blueberry in one place.
You definitely need some blueberries on your knees and legs.
Yes. Also good. All right, so we're back to blueberries again. This was probably 2018 or 19. And I think if I remember right, this was another one of the light bulb project's themes, and the theme was size, I think. So I decided it would be funny if I was trying to, or maybe it was measurement. But my idea in my head, at least, was this guy was cooking a recipe using blueberries, and instead of measuring for like weight, he would just measure size. So he would stack up blueberries and get a certain amount of, it was like this weird cross section in my head of like construction and or baking. And the image itself was really simple to shoot. It wasn't as effective as I think as some of the other blueberry shots that I have done. But I did like the fact that I still placed myself next to the blueberries, and the thing I like the most about this particular image is the shadow that's on the stack of blueberries that's coming from the measuring tape. That was a really cool detail to put in that at the time when I was shooting it, I didn't even think about that. And then later on, once I put it in there, I thought that really helped seal the image.
Interesting.
All right. So to take a break from making myself small, occasionally I will take toys and make them big, and that's what I did here in this case. I had picked up a 12-inch Batman figure a couple of years ago, and I wanted to use him in some composites with myself. And I don't know where the idea came from exactly, but I thought it would be really funny, as if he had to borrow my car because his Batmobile had broken down or had run out of gas. So I decided to Photoshop him into my driveway. And it was a pretty simple setup. It was just a camera on a tripod with a timer, and took a photo of myself standing there with the keys out, and no light modifiers, no flash, anything. It was just all natural light. And then I took the same shot, a lower angle of him standing on the same concrete, same general angle, same perspective. And when I had masked him out and placed a shadow underneath him, I realized that I needed to have something of him that was reflecting in the car, since you can see that my figure at least is being sort of reflected in the back of the side of the car. And so I copied and flipped an image of his upper torso and put it over there on top of the wheel well, where it's just slightly reflecting at about the same angle that he would be at if there were actually a figure standing there. But I probably could have noticed that and done something more about it if there had been another model in the shot, if I had had somebody do a stand-in for Batman at the time. But since there was nobody else there and I was handing the keys to nobody, it was one of those things that later on I remembered that I needed to have some sort of reflection. And that's something that years previously I would have just made the mistake of not doing anything and not having a reflection in there. But those little details, just for me at least, help make the image much more real and seal it. And I've actually had quite a few people that have asked if it's a cosplayer that I know in Seattle, because they thought that the suit is real or the person is real, and it's not. It's just a 12-inch toy figure.
Very cool.
How are we doing as far as time?
You've got 5 minutes.
Okay. Let me grab a couple more images. So again, with the size idea, taking something that's much smaller and making it bigger, I had the idea a couple years ago of this shot, and it was kind of off the notion that the older things are like memory cards and cameras and things like that, like they grew in size, or actually they started out big, and now we've got tiny little phones that take amazing pictures.
I remember the A1
back 20, 30 years ago. You had these rather large, very cumbersome cameras, and so I decided to just completely exaggerate that idea and go really big with an old Canon A1 that I have that doesn't even work anymore, but it's a really cool prop, and I've used it in several different images. And it was a simple setup again, no light modifiers, no flash. The light streaks that you see coming from the top, and there's a little bit of a flare that's right underneath my arm. Those are all digital. Those are done afterwards, because I figured that the way the light was angled and that there's a little bit of sparkle coming off the top of the camera, I wanted to match that with some digital light just to help sell it in the image as if it's a light leak coming in from the top of the frame. The image itself, I don't remember if it was, I think it was just the camera shot and then the shot of me, but the first 2 or 3 images that I took of myself, I realized that just having my arms in the right position wasn't going to matter. It wasn't going to be a good starting point, because there was no shadow to match the camera. So thankfully, I made sure to go over, and you can see there's a blue trash can in the background. I made sure to go over and grab that, and I put it on my back, and I took several shots of that with me carrying it in place of the camera. That way I had an actual shadow that was much larger than just me on the ground. And then I also had a little bit, it served two purposes because it also blocked a lot of the light that I would have had on the back of my head and on the back of my arms that would have been showing up. So in that case, actually having a physical, usable prop to take the place of the camera was the thing that really helped this image, because I would have gone into editing and and been really frustrated knowing that I couldn't eliminate those things and that I would be, too bright for having a camera that's directly on my back. I think that was pretty much what made this image come together, was making sure that trash can was on my back. And there are a couple of different images before and afters that I have on my Facebook page as well that show me holding up the trash can, and that show me just holding up the camera as well.
Almost seems like you need a strap around that camera, around across your body.
I think it had a strap on it originally, and I think I might have edited that out just because of the cumbersomeness of it.
This is cool.
All right, so this is probably going to be the last one for right now until we take the break. But this is similar to the MC Escher drawing idea that I did earlier, that I showed earlier. And this one was a drawing. The dragon is actually a drawing on paperboard that I did back in 2013. And I had the idea that I would be coloring it in and filling in the little details and such. And so when I set up to do this shot, I made sure that the angle of the camera was probably at a 40 to 45 degree angle on a tripod. And then when I shot myself, I made sure that I was kneeling on the floor, and I even got a fairly long, I think it was like a cardboard tube or something that could mimic the pencil, the colored pencil. And I made sure to hold that and placed, it seems like there was a cardboard or a whiteboard or something that was on my left side as well to help with light, because the light that was in the room that was shining on the white paper was so much brighter than it would be on me. It seemed like it was getting a little bit muted. And so using that light and bouncing it off the wall really helped light me up. And then it also helped cast the shadows in the right directions for this. And then once I had masked myself out and placed myself in the image, I just made sure to line up the pencil onto a part of the drawing that would actually be, so it would look like it's really touching it. So it's really drawing. And then I put a little bit more shadow underneath my knees and stretching out towards the right claw. That way the shadow and the light direction would hopefully match. And it's pretty close. There's still a little bit of, I think the very end of the pencil that I'm holding is a little bit too out of focus, considering everything else right around the character is in focus. But the differences in focus when you're working with something small and something big, or something that is a trick that I still have a little bit of a problem with sometimes, depending on the size of the element. And it's just something you have to learn over time to compensate or even overcompensate with having a lot more wiggle room as far as your focus field goes. Because the smaller it is, the more out of focus it gets really quickly. And it can be really tricky when you're dealing with things that are only 5 to 6 inches tall. The depth of focus is very, very thin. And sometimes something that's in focus for you is really out of focus for them. And then you try and mesh those images together in a composite, and it's very off. And you can tell that right away.
All right. So you wanna call it quits here to take our break. So I don't see any questions in the forum. If anybody has any questions, it's probably a good idea to post them now. But we're going to take a 15-minute break. You'll make it a snack break, bathroom break, whatever you like. And we'll come back and we will start up again. This is wonderful. John, this has been great so far. Everybody's loving it. So let's go ahead and turn on the 15-minute timer. Boom, there we go. It's counting down, and we'll come back and finish up. Okay. And now when John comes back, it's actually going to show you how he actually creates it. He's going to go into Photoshop and actually create something for you. I think you guys will find that very interesting. Okay, so then yeah, so far we get comments we're getting is like brilliant. They're loving it. So this is great. Thank you, John. All right, come back in 15 or so, and we'll get going again. All right, everybody, we're back again, part two, with our presentation with John Mitchell from Drum Roll Studios. Great presentation, huh? So now we get to see him work live, and you get to interact and ask questions. So, hello, Genocide Squirrel. You're very welcome. So, Genocide Squirrel says, "Hi, Steve. Thanks for having such a talented artist enjoying the small perspective. You're welcome. Hi, Alexia." And Diana Vision 2 says, "This is a great presentation." Ruskler 3D says, "Hey, did the clock stop?" Yeah, the clock stopped. about, 10, about 15 seconds ago. All right, so now we're going to get into Photoshop, and he's going to show you his workflow while you get to watch and interact with them. So ask questions and interact, and hopefully you can learn something new from all of this. Okay. So Ahi, I think it's pronounced Ahi Ab, says this is very inspiring. Graphic Studio, welcome. It's about time you get here. You get a lot of people online. Gosh. Hello, Akoff, man. Hello, Addison, 17388 or 17388. Ayab, welcome. Another viewer, welcome. Atten, welcome. Billikers, welcome. Bluebeard 62, welcome. Command Root, welcome. Hey, Crazy Cynical, welcome. Curtis Rhodes, welcome. Hey, how you doing? Cynthia Anna, welcome. Diana Vision 2, welcome. But it's actually Diana Vision to you. Dreddy 3, welcome. Equilispui, I think I'm going to screw that one up. Welcome. Welcome, Essence. Exitium, welcome. Faye Barsh, welcome. Feet, welcome. Genocide Squirrel, welcome. Graphic Studio, Helge 60, IB Wizard, Luma Graphics, Gemopi, J. Priors S. San Diego, GS 1000, Judy McLean, Lemon Juices, 12, welcome. Let's see, Michelita, welcome. Mandala, Nightwolf Prime, Ramastino, Ruscular 3D, Steph GB. Let's see, what am I missing here? The Jin Kim, welcome. V and K, Virgo Praz, welcome. Willie Sakai, welcome. And there's others on here too. They're just not showing up in that little chat stream. Okay, cool. So I'm going to let John take it away in just a minute. Now, also, I wanted to bring you guys attention to a workshop that I'm going to be teaching, and it's a 4-week workshop. It's sponsored by the Hawaii PhotoCon, and they couldn't do their in-person presentations this year, so we decided to do it online. And it's very inexpensive. 4 weeks. Each week is recorded. You get the recording. I'll put it here in the chat box. Check it out. Would love to see you guys there. We're limited to 25 seats only, but check it out and sign up and join. Okay. All right. Okay. So John, you have the mic.
All right. Well, welcome back. Hope everybody had a good break. So, in preparing for this demonstration, I was going through a couple of different images that I know people have been interested in watching me break down and/or create from scratch. And this one was particular to me. It felt like it was a good example because it's not extremely difficult, but it was very visually effective, and a lot of people I got a lot of questions asking whether or not this was a difficult picture, or how long it took, and it really wasn't that much. I guess I have a slightly skewed perspective because sometimes I've taken anywhere from 4 to 5 hours on some pictures, and that's a lot of time invested for some people. Like, it just seems daunting. But the reality for me is that most of the pictures that I do is at most taking up maybe an hour, sometimes 2 hours. And I don't know if that's, some of it's just from me getting faster and being more efficient over time, or the fact that I've tried to limit and simplify my work and my ideas. I feel like the old adage of simple is better, it really does make a lot more sense unless you want a complicated image. Uh, the shooting, the editing, your lighting, the more simple you can make all of those different elements, the easier it's going to be as far as an image when it comes together. So for me, with the editing especially, I try and make sure I'm not going overboard with sharpening or trying to add too many elements into it, that it just makes it either complicated and or it almost creates a distraction from the image. You can put too many things in an image really quickly, and some of that is just being experienced enough to know when to back off and when to try and let the story tell itself without being overly simplified. But in this case, for the image that I'm going to be working through today, the idea originally came for like recycling day, like a glass bottle or something like that. And then it was amusing to me if it was the fact that he had gone to the store to get some Coke and he had to just bring back one bottle at a time because he was too small to actually carry a 6-pack. So from there, it just kind of snowballed. My ideas tend to go very big, very quickly. And especially in this case, I wanted to make sure that the lighting was the same. I wanted to get a little bit of reflection from my body on the glass, since it is a circular bottle. I knew there would be some amount of reflections, some amount of things as far as the bottle having light coming through it too. I wanted to make sure that you could see through it. I wasn't sure if Coke was going to work for that originally because the light might not be able to go through the darker liquid. But once I finally got the idea down on paper and I drew out a couple of different ways that I wanted to shoot it, I decided that the best way to do it would be to use natural light. I wanted to make sure it was kind of a late afternoon light so it wasn't too bright, and thankfully I had some clouds up that day. And then once I had put everything together, a lot of it just was positioning and making sure, like with many of my other images, I make sure to shoot 7 to maybe 12 images of each individual prop so that I have plenty of safety and I have a few different angles to choose from, because for me at least, I know that I can get a little bit picky on which angles or which images I'm going to edit, and some of them feel really, really right, and some of them right away I can tell that that wasn't a good shot, but I'm glad I at least got that one so that I could eliminate it from my options. So that was the finished image that I just had up a second ago. And for this shot, for this image, so I had gone out and this is in my near my driveway in my street, and I made sure that the foreground, as you can see there on the bottom, it's in focus, even though it's not. There's nothing particularly sharp about it as far as the subject matter. I knew that would be the plane that I wanted to be walking on and dragging the bottle on. So once I had gathered the bottle, I made sure I wanted to have the right element as far as light. I knew the right direction that I wanted it to come from, and made sure to shoot all of those things in the exact same perspective, at the same lighting angle. The Coke bottle shot, I held it down in the exact same spot. The only way I knew to mark it was with there's a little tiny, like a leaf or piece on the ground that was in the same spot as earlier. You can see that the Coke bottle is in focus, but it's not, because the Coke bottle was slightly angled towards the camera at the time, I think. But I knew once I composited those together, that wasn't going to matter. It wasn't going to make a difference as far as the depth of focus. And for the bottle, I just had to hold on to the neck because I didn't have anything to prop it up that wasn't going to obscure the frame, and I wanted to have the whole bottle all the way to the very end of the cap in frame. So I just decided I would get 2 shots and make it simple, try and keep it as few images as possible, but I also didn't want to have a complicated setup that I'd have to try and edit around something later. So I grabbed 1 shot of the bottle. I actually grabbed quite a few shots of the bottle, but this is the one that I knew for sure I wanted to keep. The logo was facing the right way, the lighting was good, there was just enough liquid towards the neck that you got a little bit of that amber reddish color coming through. So that was a good one for that. And then for the other end, I just held on to the bottom of the bottle at about the same angle. And I think you can see that. There it is. So I just got the cap, and I made sure that it was in about the same angle, same perspective. And that way I could line it up later on with the neck and the peach, the little wraparound part on the neck.
So
I knew that I could make that line up, and then I could just edit out my thumbs and fingers.
So you brought your you brought your opacity down on your neck instead of using a blend mode, right?
I did for that just a second ago, just to show where it was, because when I'm lining things up, it usually helps me to be able to tell, like, if I'm really far off, either with the size or with the scale, scale or the perspective. Like, that lines up pretty well, but I could have easily had, it could have been far too small. It could have been like this.
Okay.
And then I know right away that that's not going to work, so I'll try and line it up, and then I'll usually increase the size of the object, sometimes with either free transform or with a smart object transform. And then once I get it close enough, I know that at least that can work in as far as editing one image to the other.
Nice.
Once I had got all of the environment that I needed, and the bottle and the neck, and I knew that at least those elements were good. I wasn't too worried about the shadows for those, because I knew digitally I could make them come in as long as I had reference pictures and I knew what the shadows opacity looked like. I would just edit those later. So I was going to take a picture of myself, similar to the camera, the big camera that I had taken that was in part 1 of this earlier today. I was going to take a picture with something on my back, but I decided that it was probably not going to work because it would be a little bit too dark for the bottle, because the bottle does have a little bit more of a curve to it where light leaks around both edges. At least in my head, that's what made sense at the time. So I decided, instead of having something on my back, I would just go to the opposite side of my house where there's a little bit more shade and still in the light, but it would, at least would not have this harsh light on my back and on the back of my head and on the back of my legs that would have been on the opposite side. So I decided to go around front, set up my camera on a tripod with a timer, and the timer was the important part, because I knew I didn't want to have a timer in my hand, and I wanted to be able to get in position, in several positions, as far as with the way my arms were angled, that would make sense for holding the bottle later on. So I didn't want to pick the bottle all the way off the ground.
So I guess,
but I wanted.
I guess my comment. So your microphone is. Do you have a headset on, or do you have a microphone in front of you?
It's a snowball microphone.
Oh, in fact, okay. Do me a favor. Keep your mouth as close as you can. So what's happening is you're moving your head around, and it feels like your voice is going in and out, when actually you're just moving your head.
Okay. I'll just try and angle my mouth more towards the microphone.
Yeah. So, and I also noticing that you got all these overcast shots, which is what happens in Seattle, huh?
It does happen a lot. Honestly, every time I'm wanting a overcast shot, then it's super sunny. So it always seems to work against me. Most of the time, even though it's Seattle, if I want a shot where there's actual rain and I'm already set up for it and I have lights and stuff, it won't rain. And then I'll have to Photoshop rain in. It's just the way it works. Whatever you want, it's going to do the opposite.
That's great. Okay.
But at least with this, I know that, for an overcast shot or something where I don't want super bright light, it's always better to, fake a bright light later on, or make a little bit of a highlight or something, rather than trying to figure out how to pull something back from being blown out.
Right.
At least that's my experience with shooting. So for this, I just basically took, I think it was a 3-second timer, and I would press the timer, take a shot of myself, and then I would get in 2 or 3 different images as far as like leaning forward farther, leaning back. I didn't know at first if I wanted to have the bottle all the way on my back, like off the ground. And then I decided, just because of the size of the bottle and how small I was thinking I was going to be as far as the finished image, I should probably make it where it was actually being drug across the ground.
Okay.
So it would basically just lean on my back, and I would move forward with my hands on the sides of the bottle, and then I could drag the bottle forward. So once I had that idea in my head, it really informed how to position my body, how to lean forward, and how far back to have my hands.
I was gonna say, how'd you get your arms way back there? That's the yoga
Photoshop.
class.
All right, so I am going to, it may be a little bit on the tedious side, but I'm going to try and run through a little bit of the masking process that I use. So for this image, what I would normally do in my process, once I have imported everything through Camera Raw, I will make a few adjustments here and there as far as the shadows and maybe even a little bit of the sharpening, but I try not to change too much of my initial images. And if I do make any changes to, say, the environment, the Coke bottle, or the picture of myself, I make sure that they're all the exact same changes. That way I don't have a problem with something being, the blacks in one picture, one subject being darker than another one. This may be a little bit speedy. I'll try and slow down and go carefully. But for this image, I will select the pen tool, and then you can start pretty much anywhere you want to. I'm going to start up here right next to my thumb.
Oh, you're using one of those, like paint the edge.
Yeah, pretty much.
Well,
I've got a Wacom monitor and a Wacom pen, so I can actually draw directly on the screen, which to me has always felt so much more natural and intuitive than using a mouse. Since I've been drawing since I was little, this is a process that just for me has made it leaps and bounds easier and more effective. I feel like I can be a lot more creative artistically, especially if I'm drawing digital things like shadows or lighting. So for the pen tool, I will just try and carefully go around as much as possible. The image itself, I'll even include shoelaces and hair. You'll kind of see what I do with that later on, because unfortunately with my rather long beard, that becomes it's a problem for most of my self-portraits. I have to figure out a way to mask around the beard hair. Down there on the right foot as well, or left foot, I guess, you will also notice that I stepped forward a little bit too far into my yard, and so there's a little bit of grass coming up, which won't be included in the final image. That's one of those little mistakes you just kind of have to roll with, and I should have planned better, but it was a fairly easy fix. All I had to do was use a different shot of my foot from one of the other safeties, which is why I say, again, it's so important to shoot as many pictures as possible from different angles. That way you can always have something else to go to, whether or not it's a hand or a foot placement, or even sometimes even just the position of your body. You can get creative with fixing a little mistake like that. So once I have completed the pen tool all the way around, I will right click, make a selection with 0 pixels as far as the feather radius, and then you'll see the little marching ants thing all around. Then I will copy, and I will paste, which creates a new layer, which is this guy right here with a little bit of green all around him. And back in the day when I was first learning how to use Photoshop, I didn't even really realize that layers and masking were a thing. I think it was probably 2 or 3 years before I realized that the masking thing was actually a really simple and effective way to do it with being non-destructive. For the first couple of years, I was literally using eraser and just going and very carefully cutting out around the entire subject that I was eliminating, and it horrified several Photoshop friends of mine to find out that I was doing that. But it was working for me. It was just something I had learned to do just by clicking buttons and figuring out Photoshop from the ground up without any kind of instruction. But thankfully now, using masking, I can make a much simpler, much more effective process as far as editing. So once you've eliminated the layer by itself with the pen tool, you would create a mask, and then you go and select a brush. Always depends on how big the scale is of the character that you got, or the subject, the item. But you want to select a brush that has black. I usually go for a very soft brush. You can do a hard brush if you want a hard line around it, but I go for a soft brush at 100% opacity. And then I will very carefully go in and start eliminating anything that's in the image that I don't want to be part of the final composite. Sometimes it's fairly painstaking. It really just depends on how much of your background is distracting. There are some people that have recommended over time that I use green screen or blue screen or something like that to be behind the character, but I've actually found that for me, at least for most of the images that I've worked on, that creates so many more problems than it helps. I've had to deal with green spill and like light leak and stuff like that on a person's skin, like right around the edge of the hand, where there would be this green tint. And a lot of that is just because the color is so unnatural that it influences the rest of the image that it's around. So I used the green screen and blue screen a couple of times, and then I was just frustrated enough with that particular process. I figured it was easier to just do it this way and shoot in the natural environment, and then just eliminate what I don't need from the final image. And for me, at least, it makes much more sense. It's a much quicker process. I don't have to do the whole setup and take down of a green screen, and I don't have to deal with the light leaks and the coloring, the color tint sometimes. Plus, I feel like there's a big advantage to not having to always depend on a green screen or a blue screen, something along those lines, that it can kind of constrict your creative process. Whereas if I can just go and set up somewhere without any kind of light bonfire or any kind of flash, I can simply focus on the image itself or the elements that I want to do, and have a lot more creative freedom. So I don't know how much of the masking I should go through. I know a lot of people understand at least the concept of masking, whether or not it's something that they do often. But I figured if nothing else, I should go around here and mask the really difficult part, which is my beard. So what I have done for this is I will mask around enough that it creates sort of a soft, hazy, blurry look around the outer edges. And obviously this is not going to be 100% perfect. You'll see what I usually do with my problematic beard here in just a couple of seconds once I've eliminated this mask. The biggest issue with hair is that you usually don't have hair that is so thick that it completely blocks out the background, so you get that little bit of a color tone from whatever is behind, or you get light that leaks through, or you just get a lack of detail sometimes in hair. So if I have found that for myself, at least, when dealing with hair, it is, I don't know what the official or what the correct right way is to do it, but I have found that it is so much easier for me to digitally create a layer based off of the color and the hair that is already previously existing. And I can sort of fake it, and you probably can tell through a lot of my images if you were to go and look at them really, if you were to inspect them very closely, now that you know what I do as far as hair. All right, so what I'm going to do is create a new layer. I'm going to place it on top of this particular layer. Then what I will do is get the clone tool and make sure that it is a much smaller brush size. Something probably around a 4. Yeah. And then I will reduce my opacity down to probably 70% and just start at 70. Every picture is a little bit different, just depends on the lighting and the background and such. But what I will do is I will select somewhere generally in the color range, and I will select several different places. At first you can just select from, say, book here where there's a little bit more red, and you hold down Alt and click, and that gives you a subject matter that's selected. And then I'll go back up to the layer that's going to be the hair, the new hair. Ooh, and that might be a little too thin or thick still. Maybe down to 2 pixels. I can get to 2. All right, stay at 3. And then on that new layer, it's selecting off based on what's beneath it. So you want to try to grab several different subjects, several different lighting areas as well to try and make it look as natural as possible. And then I would just go back through and just sort of draw out a few hairs here and there to create sort of a jaggedy edge. That way that blur edge that you already previously had underneath is slightly masked. You're not trying to make it look photo perfect. It doesn't have to look super photorealistic, but you just want enough of the color and the texture that existed previously on the hair underneath that you can have that sort of illusion that there has not been some hairs that have been edited. And obviously there are many people that are not going to need this particular trick for their beard. I might be alone in that one, but it does come in handy for a lot of like flyaway hairs and things like that for model portraits, things that you want to have edited out, but not, there are a lot of problems with halos and or light hair or things that just tend to look photoshopped as far as the edges of them. And I will usually go through and do a lot more little tiny details, like much thinner hairs. That way you don't get the thicker, darker lines. But once you zoom out and the picture is full, like it's a pretty good start as far as the beard goes. Sometimes I'll do a lot more details just to make sure that it looks right. But the before and then the after, as far as the way the hairs look, that's how I deal with very specific little things like that. The other thing to this image was the boot that had the grass across it, because once he's walking on the concrete, it makes no sense for there to be grass right there on the front of on the toe of the boot. So what I had done was I grabbed a different pose, different selection. I might have even grabbed the boot that is on his right foot, my right foot. I don't know why I keep saying his. Yeah, I think that's what I did. So as you can see here, there's the original boot that has grass on it. What I've done is I've cloned and then pasted a shot of the other boot so that I can get rid of that grass mistake that I had made by stepping too close to it. And then that just takes over for the front of his other foot. So something that I didn't intend to do, but I had to Photoshop. It just helps to have little tricks like that in your emergency bag of knowing how to deal with an oops rather than going and having to reshoot something, especially if it's hours later. Sometimes I will shoot images one day and I won't even get to editing them until the next day. And the lighting could change, the location could change. So for me, it's always such an important thing to, well, two things in particular. Shoot raw all the time. I always say to everybody, you should shoot raw if you can. And the second thing is shoot way more than you need, because I have found so many times in my editing that I will need a slightly different hand position, a slightly different bend of the knee. In this case, I needed an entire another front of a boot. Things like the beard can be edited in afterwards and faked. You can take things like shadows and highlights and things like that. But as far as your actual subject, a lot of times, whatever you shot that day is kind of what you're stuck with. So it's important to make sure you've got everything you will need, even if it comes down to going through 20 images that you eventually just throw away. It'd be better to have them than not. So once I've eliminated everything that I possibly can around the image, regardless of whether it is Coke bottle or myself, I will try and line them up a little bit ahead of time just to make sure that the perspective is right, that the sizing is right, that the scale is correct. So in this case, for the Coke bottle, normally before I begin editing a whole lot, I would probably move it about right there, somewhere right around there. I forget exactly where the first time that I did this, but somewhere along the line, so your bottom plane is fairly close as far as where the bottle is dragging and where the feet are. And then the placement of the hand. You don't want it to be too far back on the height of the bottle. You wouldn't want it like here, because then the plane is thrown off completely on the bottom and his hands are way too high on the glass. But if you get it where it's just about the same level, you don't want it too far forward either, because otherwise it's leaning into his neck. So it's just kind of playing with it and making sure that you're the image, if it starts from a strong base point, especially before you've done a lot of editing, then you know you're on the right track, and it really helps everything else as far as the edit goes. So that is where I had placed the bottle, and brought the neck. There were a few other elements. Trying to find it right now. All right, so once I've lined up the general images, you can see that while there is some light coming through back there, if I was actually physically there, this little guy was really there carrying the bottle or dragging the bottle, there wouldn't be a whole lot of light coming through because it's right against his back, and that would completely cut off any light. So what I did here was I went and carefully created a layer that is just a dark brush. And it's just to have a little bit of shadow at the top of the shoulders where there wouldn't be light leaking through, and then around here along the back. There's a little bit that comes down past the arm towards the hand. But I didn't want to get too carried away with making a really dark shadow there, because it is not only more out in the light, but it's also on the right against the glass, so there wouldn't be a whole lot of shadow. It would be really specifically close to the hand, since there's not a lot of distance to have a shadow be cast on. The next thing that I noticed that I probably should have shot at the time, but it didn't really matter a whole lot, was that I did want to have some reflections along the top. So I could have shot a separate shot of my arm just being extended like that. But what I did in place of that was I just selected the image and I dragged down with the lasso tool to create basically just an arm by itself, just the part of the forearm, the elbow, and the shoulder. And then I would copy paste that to a new layer. Then I moved that behind. There it is right there. Oh, so it's just simply a shot of the arm by itself, isolated on its own separate layer. And then I drop the opacity down to 30. That's the arm right there by itself. I dropped it down to 30 so that it looks like it's reflecting in the glass behind. But all it really is the exact same shot, just duplicated and moved up a little bit. And it looks like I must have moved it since then. And the only people that would know any different as far as it not being a reflection that I shot separately are the ones that can tell right there, the tattoo. You can see there's a skull that's reflected on both, and it wouldn't be the same. Wouldn't be the same image. It'd be a flipped image. So that's the reflection, the shadow. The next thing up would be creating some sort of shadow for the under the bottle and under my feet, and you can tell there's nothing there as far as what was existing before. I've removed that completely from where the bottle was touching the ground and where my feet were touching the sidewalk. But I know, at least from the image of the Coke bottle, how the shadows are supposed to look right there. You can see that they're very dark where it's touching, but then it very quickly goes into being blurry, and the opacity goes off a lot. So knowing that, I usually try and create I'll create a separate layer simply for the brush, so that I can take a black brush and where is it? Oh, there it is. Nope, that's not it. There we go. So I will usually just go in and paint very dark right around wherever subjects are touching. If they're actually resting on the ground, I will go in with a go in with a black brush at, say, usually I'm anywhere between 70 and 80%, just because I don't want to be too dark right off the bat. Otherwise, you're just constantly walking back and forth with your, it's too dark, it's too light, it's too dark. So I will start with the boots. And for this one, since it's mid-walk, stepping up, I won't go all the way to the heel. I'll just stop about halfway, just where it would be touching. And then I will drop the opacity down on the brush and sort of make a long line of shadow that's going from both the character and the bottle. And then I tend to get pretty fussy with my shadows. I don't like them too dark. I don't like them too light. So I will end up spending probably more time than I should, but I will go back and erase a little bit of the shadow if I think it's a little too dark in some areas and not enough in others. Again, it's so much of just how you view it and how you perceive it, and how you want to edit the image. I don't think there's really any one specific wrong way or right way. But I'll get an image in there, shadow in there, and then I'll work with that for quite a while until it looks like it's right, until I can take it away and know that with it in there, it actually looks like it really fits. It looks almost photorealistic. And I'll try and keep the perspectives the same as far as the shadow. This one in particular, it might actually be better if it was a little bit higher up. There's a little bit too much shadow underneath, but for this example, at least you can get the idea. Once that is all finished, there was another element that I remember adding in. There we go. So we see the reflection up here on the top with the arm that's been duplicated, but there's actually another one right underneath the hand, because I decided that with the hand being on the glass, with it actually touching the glass, it made sense to have just a little bit of it reflecting. I don't think it makes a massive difference like some of the other images that I have done that really, that was kind of the cherry on top, or the defining element. But you can tell without it, it just kind of looks a little strange. With it added, there is a little bit of a reflection over here on the thumb that really shows, it just looks like the hand is touching, like it's the inside of the palm where the light is hitting. At least that's my perspective. But the last thing I needed to add, once I had edited everything else together and I'd taken a little bit of time to step back and look at it and see whether or not I wanted anything else, I noticed that the light here on the back of the shirt was too bright. It was an element that if the shirt had actually been touching the bottle, I needed to, think through that and make sure that there was some shadow added, because it would be casting a darker shadow right there if an object was resting right against it. So I went in with another layer and a brush and just painted in a little bit right here, and then made sure that I didn't overdo it so it wasn't too dark, because there would still be some light coming from just the ambient light from around the side. And then once I had finished with that, again, I like taking some time off to go listen to some music or something else to just get my brain away from the image. That way I'm not so focused on it that I can't see either a glaring mistake and or to, sometimes I'm just not happy with the way things are going. And if I come back in a little while, I'll actually really enjoy the process and the taking a second to just look at it, analyze it from a refreshed perspective. Once I'm all finished with what I considered the editing for this one, it was fairly simple. I think I might have been editing for maybe an hour total time. After that is over, I will usually grab and select the entire layer, as long as I made sure that all of my elements are where I want them and that my, the lighting is good, sharpness is good. I will take and I will copy merged, which basically grabs and seals all the images into one copy. Then I will paste that on the very top. And then from here is where I usually do a lot of what I consider the universal changes, where if you're affecting anything with curves or with saturation, you're affecting every other element. So that way you don't have anything that's out of tune with anything else. Most of the time it's fairly simple. I don't do a whole lot of great tonal changes unless I'm looking for a very specific cinematic look. Like sometimes there'll be a lot more green or some sort of tone in there that isn't natural that I will go for. But with images like this, most of the time with the smaller to larger images, I try and keep them looking as little manufactured as possible. Like almost you just happen to spy out in the world, you just happen to spy this person dragging a bottle across the ground. Oh, speaking of, there was an element that I forgot to introduce. So somewhere, there it is. So on the far left side, I think this was the very last thing I noticed that I just didn't feel 100% about. And I noticed that the ground where the Coke bottle was being drugged, it didn't have any marks, or it didn't have any kind of, it didn't have an element there that really made me feel like it was being drugged. And I wanted to give some sort of direction without having, the little cartoon lines coming off the back of his legs where it shows he's moving forward. But I wanted to give a little bit of motion or a little bit of energy. So what I did was I got it's a layer that I think just had black and white, and I just drew some lines and drugged them back away from the Coke bottle. And I wanted to make sure that there was some white lines in there too, because when the light was hitting the bottom of the bottle, it would be reflecting down onto the concrete. But I didn't want to have it too white either. So I just made some lines, and then I drugged them from left to right. And then I created that layer and made an overlay layer. And I put the opacity at 78%. And then when I finally zoomed back out, I felt like that was a pretty solid finish as far as the image goes. So once I had done all of that, I would go in, do the whole copy merge thing, and post it to a brand new layer all on its own. And then I will usually go up and do just a little bit of sharpening. Use Smart Sharpen at about 15 to 17%, just to help hopefully tighten up a little bit of the lines, a little bit of the details. Sometimes it brings out little textures in the hairs and stuff, but I don't want to go overboard and get that weird HDR look that sometimes looks way over the top. So once I've done with that, I will do the sharpening. Sometimes I'll bring up the highlights just a little bit, as long as they aren't blowing out. And then on the rare occasion that I want to use a toning kind of coloring or something like that, I will usually put a layer of green or blue and then adjust that until it's almost, it's just a really subtle layer. I try not to go over the top with anything like that, just because I feel like it, for me at least, it became one of the things I used it probably too much in my earlier photography, and kind of burnt out on it. Like it can look really amateurish very quickly, and you do a really good job of making sure your color tones look really pleasant. And a lot of it depends on the model that you're working with too. If you're using building versus a person, those tones and the changes to the skin aren't going to be the same amount of extreme, I guess. And once I'm all done with that, once I'm all done with the sharpening and the finishing of the image, I usually just save it at the highest level I can as far as the size goes. I will make some different sizes for websites and for print and things like that, but I try and keep the original file size as large as I shot it. That way I don't have any degradation of quality or any loss of details. And this one in particular, I think I've added a few layers into it, but this one, originally the image was, I think 10 layers total, and that's for all of the different reflections, the added on beard, the shadows, all the different things like that. And the final image, where did it go? So after all the sharpening and everything else, this would be the final image that I wound up with, and I was really happy with it, both the shadow and the reflection. It was a cool little project to try and to do. I always like implementing small scale things into large scale, and the mix and match of those two, for me at least, is constantly challenging, and it's just a really cool creative place to be. Like you get to experience different things than you would if you were just trying to shoot everything the same size. And for me, at least, it helps a lot with the storytelling, too, because I tend to place the characters in situations where they're either cleaning up a mess or doing something mundane like going to the store or just being at home. There's one I have of a little guy who gets trapped in a mousetrap. He's trying to get some pizza. Little things like that, that for me at least, the ideas come so often that I have to write them down. And then when I finally get around to them, it's a very fun process to do because the mix and match of the large to small elements, just for me at least, is constantly entertaining. And it's a good well to dive into whenever I'm feeling a little bit creatively stifled or if I don't have anything specific as far as like an amazing prop. Sometimes I can just look around and be like, oh, there's a salt shaker. What if I was, using that to balance on or something along those lines? And it's a good place to work from, I feel like. And it's usually stuff that you just have around your house. There's nothing extreme about them or expensive about them. You're just using elements that you currently have. Were there any questions on this particular image? Was that pretty...
Okay, so let's see. Let me scroll down a little bit more. I can see a little bit. I don't think so. We've got. I need that trick for my dogs. Says Favarsh.
Which trick is that?
I think was it the one for your hair. I'm assuming that's what it is. All right, no questions.
Oh, okay. I figured for sure people would be asking like this and that. Do you have any questions at all, Stephen?
I do not.
Oh,
I'm just enjoying this. But that looks nice and clean.
Yeah. That is one of the things that I like, trying to create something as much as possible that doesn't even really look Photoshopped. Like some people go over the top and making it look cartoony, and I think that's, for me at least, that's the wrong avenue to take. I don't like making things too cartoony where they look fake, unless that's the idea. If that's your goal, that's fine. But I would much rather have something that looks like a real Coke bottle and a real guy dragging across real concrete. Like, to me, that's the challenge. That's the element that I'm trying to hit.
Bluebeard62 mentioned that this has been very inspiring.
Good, awesome. That's my goal, and I try and make sure to include a lot of the before and afters on my Facebook page. I started doing it a couple of years ago, where I included like, here's the picture that I took of myself, here's a picture I took of this place, and then these are how to edit it together. And I didn't realize at first that people were really wanting to know more about that, but they weren't asking questions.
Right.
So once I started doing that, it seemed to get a really good reaction. People were very happy that I was sharing. I guess there's too many people that aren't sharing details, so. All right,
I'm going to find, there's Drumroll Studios. I'm going to take the link from your site, your URL, and I'm going to post it in the chat box here for all the guests. So it's a Facebook page if you want to go and see even more of his work. There we go. So you've got 15 minutes to go.
Okay. I do actually have a website. Drumrollstudios.com is also my website that has a lot of pictures on it. But for the informative and like the behind the scenes stuff, definitely my Facebook page is the best place. I try and break images down there and walk through like, so many different processes that I use. I've started doing videos recently where I'm basically showing a setup. Most of it has to do with toy photography, but I'll walk through like what I'm doing as far as a setup and where I'm using my lights. And I try and get detailed with that. I obviously could go way more into detail, but I also feel like, there's little minutia that can get lost, and sometimes you don't want to sit down and watch a 57-minute video just to figure out where the guy put the lights. So I try and keep them short and sweet. But I guess if I've got 15 more minutes, should we go through some more images, or I don't know if I'll have enough time to go through an entire walkthrough of a breakdown, but I could at least show some more of the small to big.
Okay.
Images that I have.
So it's drumrollstudios.com?
It's drumroll/studios.com. I think it's
got it.
I can't remember what the upper slash.
Okay, right. Okay, so it's drumroll. Let's see. I'm gonna put it in here. Drumroll/studios. The upper, you mean dash or slash?
It's a dash. Sorry, I just
Dash.
did it for myself just to make sure. So it's
Okay.
currently displaying on
There you go.
the image. So that's my actual Facebook page where I have, I think there's close to 27,000 images right now from all over the different projects that I've done over the last decade. A lot of live shows, but the box there that has Visions is the name of it. It's a gallery that just has Photoshop and composite images, both big and small. A lot of it's also toy photography and just things that I've done that are, me basically sitting down and figuring out how to use Photoshop in a lot of different ways.
So, are you a musician?
I am. I play a little keyboard. Most of it's by ear. I don't know actually how to play as far as reading music or anything like that. But I have been playing drums for about 28 years, and that is probably the thing that I am the best at.
Thanks, Faye. Faye put the link to your website. Faye is also another admin on the Photoshop users website on the Facebook page as well, along with David. I love the one with where you were composing the figurines as musicians like Freddy Krueger and all those guys.
Yeah, there's been a lot of people that like that. Both the video that shows the behind the scenes, and then the actual show, the live shots, quote unquote, of them on stage.
Do you want to?
A lot of people really like that.
You know what? Show the video.
You haven't seen the video, or you have?
Well, I think I've seen it, but let's share it so everybody else can see it.
Oh, okay, gotcha. The video. So on my Facebook page, it's under videos.
They're not in YouTube or.
I think it's on. Yeah, I think it's on YouTube as well. I'm trying to remember where I put it. I know I was having problems uploading it to Instagram for whatever reason, but it should be on YouTube and it should be on my Facebook page as well. But yeah, it's just behind the scenes. It shows me setting them up on the table and how I'm using the lights and the smoke. And then afterwards, it shows some of the images that I got from that particular shoot.
Okay. Yeah, and maximize your video too. There we go.
I don't know if the audio is probably pretty quiet.
Yeah, but it's no big deal. Or unless if you want me to play it through my page.
Either way, we could just give a link to that people if they wanted to check it out.
Yeah.
You can kind of see the light set up as I'm doing it here, and then
I've got the
figures themselves pretty posed.
I'm going to the videos link now, so you see the one you chose was. Let me find it here. It should be.
See, on Drumroll Studios Facebook page, it should be under videos. I think it's two videos most recently.
Two videos, the most recent. So that I see the End of the World one.
Yeah, that's the most recent one. I think.
Here it is. Found it. Here it is. Freddy and the Nightmares.
Yes.
Got it. All right. So let me pull this on over, and I'm going to maximize.
All right. So here's a quick run through of my setup. Got everybody set up in place where I want them. Been angling it and working on it and grinding on it for quite a while. Probably almost 2 hours now as far as just positioning people and getting lights and everything set up. So I've got one light to the stage left, far stage left. Got one light down here, right underneath, basically underneath the stage, giving a little light to Freddy and Jason. I've got a third light, this orange one right here, so that we get this overhead light for both Freddy and Jason. And then I've got a flashlight that's taped to a flash up there to give sort of a stage light for Freddy. You'll see when the picture's taken, you'll see it's kind of a cool effect. So I've got everybody set up how I want them. Got the sign in the back, and then I threw in a couple of extra things. This is just a CD case, but it looks like band gear. It looks like one of the big boxes that they put a lot of gear in. I've got all the speakers and stuff set up. I almost got a second set of these so I could put them over here for Pinhead, but I decided I'd go with this rack that I've got these lights taped on that looks kind of like a stage setup, stage lights. All right, so I'm gonna try and get a video here, and I'll put these together. So now that everything is set up pretty much where I want it, I'm gonna try and do some smoke effects here using a vape pen. And I'm going to start over here on this side, and we'll see how it goes. And I'm firing with the remote trigger. I've already got the focus set too. And some smoke down for the ground. And all right, let's see what that turned out like. Yeah, pretty cool. Probably work on a little bit more before I get the one I'm actually really happy with. I want lights and I want smoke, but I don't want too much. I want to still make it look like it's a big tour of the band, that type of photo. So the finished one will be the one you're looking at.
Okay, that's too cool.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
That's great. So, if a real band dressed up like those guys...
Let me tell you what's going on. So, these guys in the vehicles...
If a real band dressed up like you guys, and not like those guys, you know, Pinhead knows, would that be like copyright infringement?
Wow, I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, I guess if they took the name as well, then yeah, it'd probably be copyright infringement. But
Okay.
I'd see it as a compliment.
Right. So, yeah, we got just 5 minutes left. Any questions from anybody in the audience? Comments?
Yeah, especially if there's still something that like somebody wants some help on or they're confused about that I tried to demonstrate. Like, I try and get all the little details as possible, but I'm always going to miss a little bit of something that somebody wants to know, whether or not it was, you know, what time of day it was or what kind of camera I use or something along those lines.
No comments? No questions? Boy, is he that good? Yeah, no. Okay, so Lumigraphics says, awesome. Ever done anything with animals or models?
I do all kinds of stuff with both animals and models. I know most of everything that I've shown today is me, which is a weird byproduct of back in 2010 when I first started using my camera. When I first started to learn to use it.
Maximize the one in the glass you have there.
The 365, where you take a picture every day.
Yeah.
Most of the time it's a self-portrait, and you do that for a year. And by about the middle of the first month, I was just exhausted of trying to get a hold of people or get images of people that I could take their shot or, you know, and also working a normal job. It just made much more sense to start taking self-portraits.
Right.
So I started doing that. And obviously I'm going to be my own most available model. Like if I'm around to take the shot, I'm going to be around to be in the shot. So I started doing that and using myself as a character, even if it wasn't necessarily the most flattering of poses or ideas. And that helped me get over a little bit of my self-conscious, you know, camera shyness as well, is just forcing myself to be in front of the camera as much as I was behind it. So I started doing a lot more shots like that, and obviously over the years, over the past decade, I've done a lot of shots with dancers and musicians and a variety of models for both Photoshop stuff and just straight photography, where I don't do hardly any editing to them. But I like doing the really creative, over the top Photoshop stuff as well. And most of the folders that I have on both my Facebook page and my website, you can easily find a lot of other models that aren't me. Most of them are in normal situations. I tend to put myself as the character in a lot of the large to small images. But again, it's just more of it's a subject of necessity. Like, I'm around all the time, so I can always choose my own. If I want to choose a morning where I'm gonna shoot a picture of me spilling some black pepper and cleaning it up, like, I'm going to be available. I can know exactly how I already want to pose. I don't have to try and instruct somebody and work with somebody else on that. So it just becomes a really easy thing. And I tend to have a lot of fun doing those when I can't shoot with other models as well.
All right. Now Judy McLean has a question. How did you do the Hoth World shot?
The which sign?
The Hoth World shot? Hoth? I don't know. Hoth World, like from Star Wars? The world of Hoth was a snow planet, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of where that image is at. I know I've got a breakdown on my Facebook page of it. That again was a toy shot.
Okay.
Come on. I think I know the one that you're talking about. I think.
Okay. So go into photos.
Yeah, this is my Facebook page that has all of my live events, my toy photography, and then in here there's a before and after folder that has almost 300 photos right now that are all breakdowns.
Okay.
And most of them show the finished image, but they also show the individual elements that I used. So like this one shows the full image after it's been edited, but then you also get to see the ones that I used to edit it. And I try and go into detail as much as possible in text to show how much I did of certain editing and different things.
Now she's talking about the AT-AT in the snow, like from Star Wars.
Gotcha. Yes. Hoth World 1.
To all Terran something transport.
Yes, the All-Terran transport one. Okay, this must be the one that she's talking about.
There we go, yeah.
So this was called Snow Day. And the bottom image is the finished one because we had a really, really bad snowstorm, I think 2 years ago. Or maybe it was last year. It was last year.
Yeah.
Had a really bad snowstorm here in Seattle, and there was so much snow on the ground, and we don't get snow very often.
Right.
So I immediately took that opportunity to run outside, and you can see in the top right there are two images of it's probably about 1.5 feet tall ATT, or is it ATT or AT-AT? I forget.
AT-AT. All-Terran something transport. I forget what the other A is for. All right. So then Bluebeard, number 62, says, how do you get your focus on the portraits if of your own face?
So that is a tricky thing that I've just learned over time, but using a remote and having the camera set up on a tripod, I will almost always try and position myself dead center of whatever the shot is that I'm taking. That way the focus isn't on, a fence in the background or something like that.
Right.
So I will stand directly in the center, and then I'll try and make sure that I just take enough shots that I get several of them that are in focus on me. Sometimes I will have a stand-in, whether or not it's I'll just put something in place so I can make sure to nail the exact focus. Then I'll turn the autofocus off, and I will go stand in the exact same spot that whatever it was that was the stand-in. Sometimes it's, a jacket on a coat rack or something like that, just to make sure that I've got exactly where I want the focus to be. But for myself, it usually is me just being dead center and taking a lot of shots.
All right. So another question. Have you ever used Daz Studio as your model? Are you familiar with Daz Studio?
The 3D modeling add-on.
Okay, say that again. You broke up there.
Is the Bath Studio modeling, is that a 3D model program?
Yes.
Or is it
It's a
like an
3D
actual
modeling
person?
using human beings, human figures or animal figures. DAZ.
Okay, gotcha. No, I have not.
Okay. Well, that might be something fun to work with too.
Yeah.
Of course, using 3D is a whole nother medium, so another learning
Oh, yeah.
curve to it. That's more.
So here's another one that I didn't get to today, but it was one of the breakdowns. So I got this small Batmobile toy that I decided I was going to make into that I just purchased a new car. And
That's great.
so I just photoshopped that to be sitting in my driveway. And you can see the two top shots are the only ones I used. And then the bottom one is the finished one.
Oh, that's great.
A lot of times it's just keeping stuff simple, just trying not to overdo it with, you can haul out 3 or 4 flashes and a bunch of modifiers and bounces, but eventually you're going to wind up with, is the picture going to be fun? Is it going to evoke an emotion? Like sometimes it's better to just strip all that other stuff away and just try and get a good couple of shots and make them into a cool image.
Right, and that's what I enjoy about some of the images that you presented to us is that there's emotion to them. There's a story there, and you can get into it or project your own thoughts into it. So, which is really kind of fun. I like the little girl with the zombie face.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, that's yeah, just remember, if you want to have kids, just think of what they're going to turn into.
It's a public service announcement.
That's right.
So here's one I did with animals. So these are
Isn't that
3
cute?
dogs from my friends, and then 3 of mine and my girlfriend's dogs that I made into a Stranger Things parody poster. Somebody was asking whether or not I do anything with animals, and I do a lot of shots with animals, but not so much the big to small stuff. It was just Photoshop work.
There was one I just saw with the shirt on the floor where you're ironing the shirt, I think it is.
Oh, yeah,
Right
the
there.
flattened.
Yeah, show us that one. Yeah,
Deflated
that's
is what
great.
it's called.
That's pretty funny. It has
Again, that
humor
was just one
to
of
it.
the ideas that came from having a really long day and just being so tired and thinking of being deflated and how that would translate visually, and then the idea just kind of spilled out from there.
So we are going to be giving away a 1-year subscription to the Creative Cloud today to one of our lucky users. Now, if you have already won the Creative Cloud, you don't get to win it again. Within the past year, if you've already won one, you don't get to we like to spread the wealth a little bit. Show me the one with the eclipse there, the eclipse, right there down. There you go. That's interesting.
It was the same day that we had the total, I forget what it was called, but it was a really strange eclipse that happened right in the middle of the day back in 2017. And unfortunately, I didn't get a shot of the actual sky. I wanted to, but I was at work during that time. So as soon as I got home, I started trying to figure out how to make a Photoshop image to kind of get across that same idea. And there's again another Star Wars toy that I find I use toys a lot more often in the last couple of years just because they already give me so many ideas for a story and how to do something really fun with perspective and with, just the scale of being able to park a Star Wars vehicle at in my driveway as if it's just my daily driver.
Fun images. Now, what is that one with the mirror there? The rear view mirror. Right to the left. To the left.
In the bottom.
To the
Yeah,
left.
that's another similar one. It's a small little
Yeah.
dinosaur toy. that I decided to make in a rearview mirror, as if it's chasing a vehicle.
That's great.
And like I said, it's just the simplest. I don't know if it's just my particular brain, but the simplest of places are usually where I get my ideas from. Like I like listening to a lot of music and getting creative inspiration from that.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes it's just simply a phrase that somebody says, or just thinking about, an object that's very, very simple and trying to think of a way that can make that extraordinary or make it into an image where I can be trying to clean up something or fix something. And my ideas just keep steamrolling from there. There's another one that using a toy. And this one in particular is one of those ideas that as soon as I got it, I wanted to try and do it just because the perspective of looking up would be extra challenging for me. And that's
Right.
a lot of the fun for me, is having to try and do something I either haven't done before or I'm
Right.
not even really sure how I'm going to pull off. So I'll try and incorporate it into an image. There's another one with a dog.
Great. That's great. Those your dogs?
Yeah.
Oh, they're cute.
Oh, yeah, they're adorable. And they like being the models. The only thing I have to do is give them treats, and that's pretty much the only payment.
Get a little doggy.
Well, was there any more questions? Are we
Well-
almost out of time? I didn't want to drag on too long if we didn't need to.
Graphics Studios has asked, do you like Doctor Who?
Love Doctor Who.
Yeah.
Very old school fan. I used to watch it late Saturday night on a TV that could barely even get a signal. So it would be all snowy and grainy. We could barely hear what was going on, but we'd try and tune in back in the early 80s to catch it late night Saturdays.
Show us the one with the face mask there. I think it's multiple heads of you with the face mask just to your left.
Okay. Yes, this is sort of a social commentary type of image.
Yeah,
But
it
for
is.
whatever reason, you can see all the way to the left, there's a small little hand vacuum that had this hose on it and had like a filter part on the bottom. And that, for whatever reason, it just inspired me to create the rest of the image based off of the vacuum cleaner and then a shot of my head.
Very cool. I like the
It kind of reminds me of something that Tool would do as far as their album work.
So Judy mentions that she has hundreds of Star Wars toys, and now she knows what to do with them.
Excellent. That is a good thing to hear.
All right, so let's wrap things up. So what we're going to do is and what you can do is and thank you so much, John. I think you've been an inspiration to everybody here. I'm going to turn on my video here, where what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick a number, and from 1 to 100. Now, this is for a drawing for a 1-year subscription to the Creative Cloud. That's everything that Adobe owns, Photoshop and After Effects and everything. Okay, for 1 year. So I've picked a number, I've written it down, and I'm going to make my portrait screen larger so you guys can see the number as I share it with you here. Oops. Let's go there. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to show you the number. Okay. So everybody type in a number in the chat box. And whoever gets closest to my number is going to win a subscription to the Creative Cloud. I should have a lot of numbers coming in, so everybody can do it. And John, you're welcome to do it as well. Just pick a number. So John, do you have do you use the full Creative Cloud?
I do. I actually do a lot of video editing and music editing as well, so it just made more sense to have the full package.
Okay. All right. I'm looking at the numbers here. I'm going to give you guys another minute. Put your number into the chat box. Okay. All right. 10 more seconds. 10 more seconds. Okay, so it looks like I'm going to pick the winner now. So it looks like the winner is going to be IB Wizard, because my number is number 5, and he is the closest. So congratulations, IB Wizard. We'll get you a my Adobe contact will contact you with the proper information for getting your subscription to the Creative Cloud. All right, let's put this back over here. Thank you, everybody, for coming. This has been wonderful. John, thank you so very much. Now, let's see. Rescue 3D has a comment. It says, does John do tutorials on the music side?
I do not on the music side.
Okay.
If I was more knowledgeable about the music, then I probably would. But yeah, the most that I've done as far as tutorials has just been basically Photoshop and photography.
So IB Wizard has made a comment here. What do you mean? That's David Good, who's the co-manager for the Photoshop website. You're saying give it to the next person? Is that a yes? You're welcome. Welcome, Steph. Yes? Okay, so IB Wizard wants to pass on his 1-year subscription of the Creative Cloud to the next person. So the next person next to 5, closer to 5, which I pushed in here, would be, let's see, let's kind of scroll up here and see what we've got. I think the next person would probably be number 13. Would that be it? Number 13, Michelita. Okay, so Michelita, David is passing on his subscription to you. So Michelita, I'm going to type in my email address. I need you to email me. Tell me you're the one that wanted the subscription to the Creative Cloud, and I will contact Adobe and get you set up. So I'm typing in right now, and you can thank David for that. There we go. So Steve at chromaillusion.com. I'm going to type it in there. Michelle. Yes, Michelle, you've won the 1-year subscription to the Creative Cloud. I put in my email address. So email me telling me that you're the person that won the Creative Cloud, and we will we'll get you set up. So, all right, this is great. Thank you so much, John. This is wonderful. And
Thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun.
yeah, and hang tight there. I'm going to turn off the stream to Twitch, and then you'll still be on Adobe Connect. Okay, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and shut down Adobe Connect. So now, just to let everybody know, tomorrow I'm going to have another stream here, same place that you're at now. Make sure that you follow me right now. Okay, on the Twitch site. Okay, so follow me so that you're notified of every time I stream. I'm going to have a stream tomorrow. It's going to be a 3D stream. Okay, which I think many of you might be interested in checking out. But come back tomorrow, same time, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Looking forward to seeing you, and have fun. We'll see you next time. Same place, same channel.